Hello, everyone. Welcome to True North Project. This is Christian, and if you are new to True North, welcome. This is a place for sense making, soul searching, storytelling, and yeah, just strap in for the ride. And welcome to a bit of a rabbit hole. Um, if you are returning, glad to have you back. And this is another, I've been releasing, kind of cleaning out the closet and releasing some old episodes that were really, great conversations that I recorded while I was on the van trip on the West Coast and in 2022. And then, like, I had, I don't know, four or five of these stacked up and um, had this sort of cataclysmic kind of moment in my life right around my 30th birthday. And we just, um, you know, dropped the ball completely on the podcast and just let it go for a while. So, plus running into some friction with, editing and video and all that kind of stuff. So, now that I've got a producer, I've got the studio set up, and I've got, systems in place for hopefully just crushing podcasting and releasing, regular episodes. Expect more frequent and regular cadence of weekly episodes, and then we'll get these these old episodes out of the queue. Even though they're still really good. Like in preparing for this intro, I went back and looked at this conversation, and I was like, wow. We talked about this was a conversation with my friend Sanaz, who I met at an event in Sedona, a Graham Hancock event, where we were essentially just diving into ancient civilization and like lost human history and whatnot. But in this conversation, we talk about digital versus analog humans. So sort of this transition into the technological age and the merging with technology, being sucked into the metaverse and big data and all that kind of stuff, just the ethical versus the extractive technology, the ideas of digital sovereignty, global citizenship, this kind of erosion of our autonomy and privacy at the cost of, for convenience. Talked about my story a bit in growing up fundamentalist Mormon, and sort of the relationship between, cults and sort of YouTube or algorithm rabbit holes, right? Echo chambers, in other words. Basically, just a fun, pandering philosophical conversation about ancient civilization, lost wisdom, this sort of metamorphosis of our species in 2022, now 24, and DAOs, collective intelligence, blockchain, and it finished with being how do we be good ancestors and orient towards a more beautiful world. So this was very enjoyable. I had a lot of fun visiting Sanaz out in Laguna Beach and recording this. And I hope you really enjoy it. If you want to support this podcast, I'm supposed to start plugging things, but basically just like this, give us 5 stars if you like it, share it with a friend. Yeah, those types of things. Subscribe, do the things that you're supposed to do, do what you're told. No, we really appreciate the support. And hopefully I can get this, I really enjoy conversations like dialogos, diving in with people, dropping in. That is super easy and natural for me. It's not any friction at all. And so I'll do that for free forever. It's the publishing, the editing, the preparing, the schedule, like all of the things that go along with actually podcasting that, especially if you're going to try to like put a lot of energy into it and try to create some income from it so that it sustains itself. All of that is new and more friction and more difficult. And one of my 2024 intentions is to grow this platform, not necessarily like trying to blow up and make it huge. I mean, if it grows, it grows, but definitely want to have a bunch of conversations because when I do the podcast, I find that I'm a better person, better mental health, happier. In general, I'm, diving in with people and it's scratching that kind of curious itch that I have. And I just really enjoy it. So it's kind of autotelic, self-motivating. So I'm going to keep doing that. And hopefully the production side, now that I've got a producer and I've got more discipline and systems in place, hopefully that side also starts to shine, and this finished product gets better and better. So that being said, I'll wrap this already too long intro, which obviously I need to get better at that. I need to get a template for like just, 1-2 punch, that's the intro, and then it's over. So expect shorter intros. But thank you for your support, and much love. So what I was saying is, we were talking just barely before we went live. Oh, by the way, this is for you.
Really?
Yeah, that's for you. I normally just give them to people after we do podcasts, but I feel like I've spent so much time with you already and had such a good time. Like you're already on. Like I want to give one of those.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I have a friend in the Northwest who has a little side gig where he does coins like this. Like you can make whatever you want.
What is this? The symbol?
So the symbol in the middle is our logo.
Yeah.
I'll just show you this way. So check that out.
Yeah.
So the
it's
star in the middle.
In the end.
Yeah. So the
wait a
N
minute. So that's
is the N for north, and then the star in the middle is the center of the seed of life, or the that what you're looking at, the flower of life, and so
the astronaut.
So there's something weird about it, because on the one hand, like I didn't really plan for it to be that way. Like it just kind of emerged working on it with this artist, Kenzie, who did our branding. And I just kind of felt like the geometry itself is like true north. Do you know what I mean? Like the what it represents, like what it means. In other words, like at the core of creation, there's this like signature, and it's like this is one of those things. You know what I mean? Where it's like manifesting in all these different cultures and all these different ways around the world, around the globe, and then so true north is kind of like, I don't know. It's like, what's the most fundamental thing to you? That would be your true north, something like that. But I don't know. It's hard.
North tribe.
It's kind of like an evolving idea. It's just been changing over the.
Let it evolve and become what it may.
Yeah, who knows? It's also the name of our membership at the Float Center, True North Tribe. So we give them out to our members at the Float Center as well. Yeah. And the idea, I guess, is that part of like the process of our planetary healing, if you want to call it that, like it sounds corny, but the process of us evolving into like a type of species that we'd want to actually identify with, like, you know what I mean? That we can be proud of, like as a species. Like, number one, we take care of our environment, like that we live in. And if we're going to make like a transitionary shift, then part of that healing process is like connecting to community, right? It has to be like reconnecting to other human beings. So
in person.
Yeah. And like hopefully in person. Like not that you can't gather digitally or whatever, but hopefully in person.
Yeah, there is some Web3 games already marketing digital. They're like they're marketing collective digital consciousness games. Or something of that sort. I'm like, what is digital collective consciousness? Tell me.
Something like Twitter, digital collective consciousness, like something like the internet. That's like our digital collective consciousness. We have like this, or the noosphere, you might call it. Like the noosphere.
But when you're marketing to people to come join in, that's how it's marketed. It might get confusing for some. Imagine you're a kid and you hear the word collective consciousness. You're a teenager, and then it's marketed to you in the digital sphere, and the game just looks like fantastic because you get into it and you look like you're transcending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It appears real to you because this is all you know.
Yeah. So there's going to be like some sort of almost like rapture ideology around like transcendence into digital.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's trippy, dude. That's trippy.
Yeah, because your avatar can look like it's very transcendent,
Yeah, but
and you could see its aura.
Yeah.
And the more tokens you collect in there, the more your aura expands and attains all these little medallions around it, so that you could virtue signal to everybody else.
So this is
how
something
expanded your aura is.
I thought you were speaking like hyperbole. You're telling like an actual thing that exists right now.
Yes. Well, look, the game itself exists, and they're creating tools or games or applications for meditation on Web3, and what that looks like when you're in the virtual reality space of it. Like, there's all these little pieces that once they converge together, it just looks like it could be advertised as you're going into this transcended world, and you can have this enlightened experience because you get to meditate there and socialize and learn, and just travel the multiverse.
Yeah. And
Why would you want to come back to the real world?
That's a good question. For a lot of people, they wouldn't want to. For a lot of people, they wouldn't want to come back because the real world's going to be worse than the metaverse. Ready Player One is a really cool story about that. Have you read that book?
No,
or
I
seen the
haven't read
movie
it.
or whatever?
I've seen the movie.
Oh, you have?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you got the concept then. So it's like that's a pretty fun. Like, I see that as already a thing, not even without the metaverse. That's already a thing today. Like, that already exists in the sense that there's people who are existing mostly online. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Their entire existence, their memories, their interactions, their thoughts entirely exist online.
Yeah, they've kind of like outsourced part of their brain in a sense to
Well,
their
they
phone.
got hijacked.
Yeah.
We might refer back to this time as some sort of creepy digital colonization of our mind.
So colonialization of our mind, by who? Or by what? Like, is it a conscious colonialization? Is it a choice by some party of or actors or people or companies or whatever who have the ability to colonialize our mind? Like our
well, they are.
Right. So
I don't know who. I mean, it doesn't matter who, because we're just like at the first iteration of all this. You know, it can evolve. Like, when we begin to integrate with Web3, we'll see that evolve a little bit. And then what's going to happen with Web4 and 5. So I don't know who or what. It's hard to point fingers exactly, but it is happening. We can see it occurring right now. We see it occurring at the hands of centralized megalithic companies. So you can point at those companies, but then who's on the boards of those companies? I don't know.
So is it just the board though? Because the board's also beholden to shareholders. So
Right.
if you have a publicly traded company, at least, and pretty much most companies are very for-profit, very capital-centric, very like, oriented on the goal, which is to increase profits in this quarter. Like, that's kind of, I mean, obviously there's bigger term picture thinking than just quarterly, like we got to grow as a company. So you're looking at like how you can develop and what technology are you trying to bring to the world or whatever, right? Like, when Mark Zuckerberg is switching to like Meta, he's thinking big picture about the future of humanity, and he's thinking about how humans are going to exist, and he's creating a metaverse.
But who elected him? How did we outsource this
Right.
great power to?
So nobody
to him?
elected Mark Zuckerberg. He came up with an idea, or stole an idea, or came up with an idea with other people, or however that goes, and started a company. And the company grew into a billions of person user base. Like, it grew into the planet. Like, everybody online is on Facebook. Do you see what I mean? Like, and pretty much like it's this massive percentage of us. And so more than 3 billion users. Like, he created something that went totally viral.
Yeah.
And now he's one of the most powerful and rich people
Well,
in the
he's
world.
like an emperor.
Yeah.
Of modern times.
Yeah.
And well, the thing is, they have about 10 years of this. They have the data. They know what's going on. There was, look at it this way. If right now, to run an experiment on people, and you want it to be a certified experiment, right? You have to go get peer reviewed. Mm-hmm. You have to have doctors on there. There's a board that oversees that. And then it's done. There's double blind studies and all that kind of stuff. And then we get some result at the end of that. And then we can say, oh, if we apply this formula, or we can do this, or set these sort of conditions, people will behave this way. But there's some parameters of safety to that. But Facebook, what they do is they generate havoc on a group of people through their algorithms, and they get to sort of test out some sort of social contagion on their users.
Yeah.
And they know that they're doing that, but there's no oversight on that. So they can experiment, and there's no
the
oversight
user
on that.
signed a user agreement. So that's the strange thing, is it's completely consensual on the
It's
user
very
part.
consensual.
Yeah. Or
Legally
at least unconscious.
protects them, but it's not really informed
Consent.
it's not informed consent or agreement, because even if you were to spend, I don't know, 5,000 hours reading your end user agreement, they can update it next month and then you'll have to read it all over again.
Yeah. So it's basically just like to mire you in paperwork to stop you from understanding what's really going on. Like, that's part of it. Now, obviously, another part of it's like, you have to list out all of this stuff. So I don't know what they're required to actually put in there. So like maybe the law is part of the problem, and that you have to have like this fucking bibliography of shit and this legal verbiage, because you have to like play the legal code game and hire the lawyers, and you don't want to like be suable. So it's like they create this fucking Bible or whatever, and it just gets
that nobody
updated.
can read.
Yeah.
But that's essentially the story of the Bible, right? Because not everybody can read it. That's why you.
Yeah, no shit. There's something true. I mean, I wouldn't say that's how the Bible emerged, but there was a period of time for sure where you've got like a priest class that is allowed to interpret the only truth,
Right.
basically the sole source of truth, the Bible, and then they are the only ones who are allowed to even read and write, like to even speak that language of that
and most
Latin
people
in that
won't
Bible.
Understand.
Yeah.
It's very
So they're
dark
just
to
taking
say
it
that
as
that's
like
very
trust from the
similar
priest.
to your end user agreement, except it doesn't contain the word of God. It contains the word of whoever is the head of the company.
Mark Zuckerberg.
In that case.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so
we're
there's
just
so many
kind of
ways
like plebs all over again. We're like, we don't know what this is, but we'll accept it.
Yeah, so what are we accepting exactly? Like what is it that you're agreeing to in your user agreement? And not in legal terms, but like what are we actually signed up for right now? Like what's coming down the pipe, like in your opinion? Like what do you think is, given the state of things and given the fact that we are 3 billion people sort of hijacked by technology and algorithms, and it's not all Facebook's fault, but yeah, they're kind of like a major player, and that's changing like the geopolitical landscape with elections and shit like that. You know what I mean? And changing, everything, not just with elections, like connecting the whole fucking world through their platform. And then which is a good thing. Like that part of it's a good thing. Like the fact that I can search someone's name in Facebook and most likely find them. Like
Not me.
That's a good point. I still have mine. I'm still Facebookable.
You're Facebookable.
Yeah, I'm Facebookable. And I was this close to canceling it. Like I deleted my Instagram or whatever, but then like I was going to go delete my Facebook as well. And it was like, fuck it, I'll just take the app off my phone and I won't get on it unless I like need to look up something. But it's just such a fucking, like, it's a network, It's a crazy network. Like I can see why it exploded, because the value of a network is who's on the network. So it's like if you can reach someone through the network, then it's worth having being on it.
Well, yeah.
Including getting your word out. Like that's the weird, and this is the weird, strange debacle. Is it's like, how do you get your word out authentically, still creatively, and not like completely compromised morally because you're like using Facebook to do it?
That's the big question. Well, when I initially signed up to Facebook, you needed a college ID to do it. And I signed up because my boyfriend signed up, so I wanted to see what he's up to. Like,
so you signed up for it that long ago? How long ago was that?
Whenever it was first launched, obviously I was still in university, so definitely over 15 years ago. When did Facebook launch?
2000. Well, the iPhone launched in 2007. Facebook must have been like 2004. Or some shit. I don't know. It precedes the iPhone, doesn't it?
We have to know.
Because I remember being on Facebook. Well, maybe it's just because I didn't have an iPhone, but like I remember being on it like web-based prior to just on a smartphone. There was definitely a time where Facebook was more like MySpace, where you were like on your computer using it when you wanted to.
Yeah. So I went on and I created this profile because I wanted to see what my boyfriend was up to.
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on? There's this place where he can
You
talk.
wanted to see what he was up to?
Yeah. It was both of our first years in university.
Right,
And
right.
so he was very popular. And so I was just like, what's going on? So I went on there. And I think I was on it for about a couple of years. And then I was like, something is wrong. Because I was listening to so many podcasts at the time with the guys that were creating these algorithms at Facebook. And I was just like, wait a minute, something creepy is going on. They're talking about like how to like nudge you in a certain way, or you know, the way that they're talking about it, it's like as if it's some experiment, you know. And I got really freaked out, and so I deleted my Facebook. And even when I had it, it was just really my friends and family, because I wasn't posting for anyone else. I didn't have followers. And and then at the same time, the psychology of like wanting to be a follower to something, or wanting to like something, or it was just so strange to me. So I got off of it. And since then, I've been looking into all of this, right? Like reading, researching, and thinking about what is the best way to be authentic, like you said, online. Have a very intentional digital footprint, right? So if you were to reflect back on your digital footprint 10 years from now, how would you curate that, right? Because that's essentially a big part of your digital history. So if I'm going online, so I got off of all of social medias, and I was like, well, how long can I run this experiment of doing my business, living a normal life, and not relying on that? So it became very community oriented. So everything is just happening in the real world. And during this, I'm thinking about, you know, all these topics that with relevance to how technology is affecting us. I'm talking to people about it and trying to figure out what's the best way. Like you said, how can you be online? How can you start a message? How can you be impactful without just doing it for likes, or doing it to sort of appease the algorithms, right? Because the more you appease the algorithms, the more it'll rank you up and the more money you make. And also, you don't really get to choose who your advertisers are. So that's kind of creepy. And you're at the mercy of whatever politics is going on at the time. And so what happens is, if you're now in that period online and you're interacting, you're following this political organization or this group or that group and you're just sort of
or this QAnon community.
yeah, right? You don't realize that you're forming a digital footprint.
Right.
And so that digital footprint perhaps will be what you use for your ID to log into some virtual world, because it will assess how you're going to behave in that world. So part of what...
Yeah. So in other words, if you were to use a different username, then you're going to get a different algorithm. You're going to get a different thing trying to nudge you. You're going to get a different piece of marketing based on the ID that you used to sign in, obviously. Basically, like who's the person we're looking at here, so that we can, like, you know, so that the thing that they inputted, like they gave the algorithm the inputs and the algorithm's giving them back outputs, right? So if you've got the wrong person, then it's strange, like it doesn't work the same way. So like yesterday when we were at the drum circle, like this chick that sat down next to us, was drumming next to us for a while. I looked over at her, I just was looking around, and I looked over and noticed she was on Facebook. And I noticed because she's looking at a selfie, she's looking at a picture of herself, and she was like, you know, posting this picture of herself that was like drum circle life or whatever, right? Like just, sorry, just like whatever people post, like when they do that, you know. But like, she was posting it, and it was so strange to me, like how she was interacting with it, like just from at a glance, do you know what I mean? And just like kind of scrutinizing this post before she hit post, just like I'm sure everybody does. Like I've done the same thing, like where you're just like, you're double checking it, you're making sure before you hit post that it's like something you want to share with the world, right? And the whole interaction, I'm thinking as she's scrolling after that, like on her newsfeed, I'm like, all of that stuff to me is like non-interesting in this moment. Like I don't care about what's on her news feed. I'm more interested in
But it still
watching
grabbed
her
your
on her news
attention
feed.
because all the blue light wants is your attention anyway.
Yeah. Well, there's like drums going all around. Yeah. There's like drums everywhere, and somehow she's just like she's scrolling. It was crazy. But like my point is it was interesting. It was interesting to see that like that dynamic play out, and obviously you see it all the time.
Yeah.
Like you see it all the time when you see people just like doom scrolling. It's like,
Well, see, if you were to look at like you yourself, right? Reflect back on the last 10 years and say, okay, I was literally an immigrant into this digital world, right? I didn't know really what's going on. I signed all these agreements and I posted, I shared, I did everything with good intent. And I didn't know that I was being exploited, or I didn't know if what was happening to my data and yada, yada, yada. And up until now, where this information is gaining mass attention, right? So how can you, going forward, let's say with Christian, with everything that's happening with True North, how can you be very intentional as a digital citizen,
yeah,
right? And where you're posting, what platforms,
right,
for what reasons, and how are you feeding the algorithms? Or are the platforms you're on in alignment with your values as someone who wants to have autonomy, right? So I think we're at that critical time of trying to figure out how to post content or how to get a message out or how to really utilize what these tools are for, which is having a collective, like a global collective community. That's what Facebook or these platforms, that's what they're designed for. And so I just think that it would be interesting if it was the users, stopping, sort of understanding what's going on and turning into participants or turning into digital citizens that can utilize this technology in a way that will steer it towards that global community that is more cohesive coherent rather than divided, because now all these amazing tools are being used to create division. So it's almost like I look at it in the sense that like you can't really be a victim if you're informed and are willing to take action with how you participate online, because it's feeding this greater machine that's then affecting everyone adversely. So everyone is a participant.
Yeah. So, well, there's a couple of things to tease apart. Like one is, for people who are on Facebook, this isn't to other them. This isn't to be like, oh, you're the bad guy because you're feeding the machine or something, because everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
Like you would be putting everybody in the box, you know what I mean? Of like, oh, bad. It's like, no, that's us. Like I have a Facebook, like everybody has a Facebook. Do you see what I mean? You're one of the few people who's actually completely off of Facebook. Like, I shouldn't say with a few people, but you know what I mean? Like percentage wise of like the developed world of people who are on the internet. Like I've been in Myanmar and it's the trippiest shit. Like you're in basically like a third world country where everybody has like a really cheap smartphone and Facebook's completely like integrated into their society in the way in which their government's controlling them through the algorithm. Like that's literally what's happening. I mean, they went on like a genocidal fucking quest to take out these Buddhists that were in their, not Buddhists, non-Buddhists in their country. I don't even remember maybe they're Islamic. I think these people were Islamic in their country. Whatever it was, they weren't Buddhist. And there was this literal like ethnic cleansing playing out, facilitated by literally facilitated by Facebook. Like, and this is just one of many cultural, like you said, cultural contagion. Like it's one of many of those experiments playing out. Like what happens when third world country gets, technology like an algorithm with asymmetric power over their brain, where they have really no idea what the fuck. They don't know. They don't understand the bigger picture of that.
That what I'm suggesting is that if you are using Facebook or you are using these platforms, that instead of being a user in becoming a participant. So it doesn't matter which network you're on, which social media platform you're on, you are an informed digital citizen. You understand what's going on. That's what matters. That's all that matters, because then you're not easily exploited, because you understand, if I am on this platform, this is what's going on. That's why I'm really excited with tools within Web3, because now if I go on a platform, I can have a data bank at the very least to store my data. I might be able to not give certain third parties access to my information. So there is a layer of protection. There's a layer that we can have, but unless you become informed, you're just not going to care to have it. And so you almost are becoming these puppets to these algorithms and their strings.
Yep. Yeah. So the algorithms have got the marionette strings, and we are completely devoid of sovereignty. So
that's what exactly it's designed to erode.
Yeah.
That's why it's so dangerous. So that's when we started to film the documentary, and David, in writing the documentary, was wanting it to be about digital addiction. He wanted to really shed light on what's going on and how are these devices addictive. And it evolved into something now that's about human rights issues. So it's about digital coercion. It's about erosion of our rights and right to autonomy and sovereignty at a cost of convenience, essentially. So you are using services for free that are eroding your right to will your future, right? Erosion of privacy. And all because you wanted to use a free network. I think what the idea behind that is, if for a lot of people, they don't really know that they can have rights. They don't really know how this is affecting them, and they don't really know how it's affecting their community. So I use Google products, right? I have a Gmail account. I use Google Docs like everybody else. But it's kind of sad that I have to do that knowing that there's no barrier to protect my identity or protect my data. And that I don't like to feed this greater, I think of all the data that is being collected as the fertilizer for this AI that's becoming generally conscious.
Even just your location data from your Google Maps. I mean, that's massively telling. It's like everywhere you've ever been.
Through my interaction as a digital citizen, I'm feeding that, right? I'm feeding all this information and data that's going to give shape to this AI.
And you're trusting the Google overlords.
Yes. But hey, that is as much ours as it is theirs.
The data is, yeah.
Yes.
You could argue that it's actually your data, not theirs. I mean, because you're the node on that they're tracking.
It's a one-way mirror. Now, if we had access to all of that data collectively, it was like open source. There is, I think, opportunity for so much amazing things to emerge. But right now, it's just being handpicked for whatever the agenda of that particular corporation is. And it could just be, it's nothing. I'm not suggesting that it's being done with that malicious intent, but it's just not being done with foresight and taking into account what the externalities of those decisions are. Like if we steer things this way, or, if we make this cool right now, there is no regard for externalities on that on a social level.
So what would it look like to have we can go in this direction. There's a lot of things we could talk about, but what would it look like to have this solution, or this version that does have sovereignty as a component baked in? So it's actually not looking to exploit the individuals on the network, but it's actually looking to upregulate their sovereignty. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Make them more sovereign agents. In other words, one way I've heard Schmachtenberger talk about it is having a algorithm that's showing you other perspectives, right? Rather than just the same thing. over and over because it's polarizing, right? So like, in other words, if I feed you more QAnon videos, then you'll stay scrolling, you'll stay watching, you'll stay on the platform because you're hooked on that. And so I'm going to keep giving you that. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah,
But
you're a
if,
hamster on a wheel.
yeah, but what if the next video that came up in your feed was like, I don't know, some skeptic or some rational, actor, like someone like say Sam Harris, like let's say Sam Harris is
just pure
explaining,
logic.
yeah, just somebody who like Sam Harris to explain the QAnon phenomena or something, right? Like in the best way as he can. Like imagine that. Like just imagine somebody articulate that can kind of see the bigger picture and can maybe even a podcast where they're bringing two people in, because when you do that, it's like you can kind of get more of the picture, you know?
The collective. It would be funny if it was like it was like a virtual Zoom room with like participants, and they're all in meeting rooms having conversations, and then and you just hear the audio in the conversation, so they're all happening at the same time, and then Sam Harris pops into the virtual room and like mediates just through logic whatever is that division between that particular group, and you just hear the audio behind it. I think that'd be hilarious.
Yeah, I think we need somebody who's fucking good at explaining this shit, or at least. But the thing is, you have to be able to do it in a way that people can actually grasp and relate to. It's not just like some heady thing that nobody can like really follow. So like you're trying to get it to land. You know what I mean? But I'm just saying. My point being is like, what if you had that thing pop up next in your feed versus the next QAnon video? So the algorithm's trying to get you to see the other perspective, and it's just like, okay, bounce it back and forth.
Yeah.
So to take this example all the way back to home, what if there were other adults in my life telling me, hey, what about this other stuff about Mormonism that you don't know about? You know what I mean? Like, hey, have you read Jeremy Reynolds' CES letter? Like, have you read that?
But would you respond to it? Do you think, or you'd be like, get out of here?
Then no, as a young person, if like my whole life I grew up with both perspectives and both options, like I had the optionality and the sovereignty of like, hey, do this or do this. Well, it's not so black and white, because it's like do this and do this. Well, do this means be with your family. You know what I mean? Be with your tribe, be with your community, like live in community. Like, of course, that's what you're opted into. Like, that's your community. That's the only thing you know. Like it's just your patch of the world, and it's kind of insular in that way. Like we're kind of separate from everybody else because we are this little pocket of this particular flavor, this particular ideology called Mormonism. You see what I mean? So it's like a flavor of that has led to like this. It's like a tributary off this greater trunk of Mormonism that's led to this little niche version of Mormonism, and that's the us-them dynamic. Do you see what I mean? Like that gets created. So when you're in that dynamic, it's the same as a Facebook community or a YouTube channel, right? It's basically like where there's people who are in similar reality bubbles. They're in similar echo chambers, right? So they're kind of like on a similar vibration where they can speak each other's language and understand each other's reality more. They're more on that like vibration. And then, when you snap out of that, like you're in a totally different space. And so it's like I never got as a young person, I didn't have like one parent telling me something and the other parent telling me something. I was getting the same message, and my community was reinforcing the message. So it took till I was 20 years old before I read the CES letter.
24 years old?
No, just 20 years old.
Oh, 20 years old.
Yeah, but that's actually when it was written. So I guess that's the wrong way to say that, because
well, let me ask you this.
I might have read it younger.
When did you have that awareness or the knowing or the curiosity? Because that must have stemmed from something. Like that you had the openness to even want to read it, or
yeah. So
or
that's
just curiosity.
That's just being depressed in the current system. So, like, yeah, sure, there's curiosity too. Like, of course. I mean, but at that point in my life, my curiosity was also pretty limited. Do you know what I mean? I think curiosity is almost a byproduct of sovereignty. In a sense, because if you take away a kid's sovereignty, they stop becoming curious. Like if you can't explore, if you don't have the sovereignty to go and explore what you're curious about, then why be curious? It's like when a dog doesn't have any like play left in him, because like you've chained him up for so long or something. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. I think I think my curiosity levels changed radically, but it was more about like, so there's this saying, like, if you have like a question about something or a problem with something, right, you just put it on the shelf. So that's like a metaphor for like, just put it on the shelf, wait a while, right? Maybe the truth will come clear later, right? Maybe your problem with plural marriage will go away and you'll start liking your sister wives, and or maybe like God will make it clear to you and you'll understand and like you'll adapt better, right? But if you have a problem, it's not the principle. The principle's not the problem. You're the problem, and then you're not aligned with it, so you need to put it on the shelf until like you can take it off the shelf and now you can like have it.
Oh,
You see what I mean?
really?
Yeah, it's more like you're shaping yourself. You are trying to fit into this image, or this on this path, this straight and narrow road to salvation and exaltation, and it requires these particular ordinances and these particular things that you need to do to get there, and it's mitigated or mediated by these authority priest class. It's a priest class that's interpreting the truth for you.
Wait, this sounds like all the people that would then, if there was some term in the future where people realized like their minds were hijacked by this machine, they would probably really identify with your story of growing up Mormon.
Well, here's the thing. Like before,
If you think about it.
yeah, but what's the machine? That's the question, right? What is the machine? That's a very interesting question to me, because we're talking about like, well, in Facebook's case, it's like this AI, this algorithm, this thing that's like giving you, it's like using predictive, like, I don't know what you call it, but it's using your data to give you the best stuff to keep you on the platform or whatever, right? And that can take you in so many different directions. It's not gonna. You might end up in a QAnon conspiracy cult. You might end up just in like seeing like, I don't know,
Or they might nudge you
all of the
wherever
police
you
who've
end
killed
up.
black
It's not
people.
even so much where you think you're ending up there. It's that how are you,
Yeah.
you're nudged in a certain direction when you're going down that rabbit hole. Like initially when we would go down these YouTube rabbit holes, I don't think the algorithm was so advanced yet.
Mm-hmm.
But now you have to like really be careful, because you might start believing something that you didn't really arrive at by your own sensibility and logic.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, for sure. So that same thing applies to the other echo chamber example we were using, the real cult, like not the online
so there's
cult,
a real
but
so
like the
growing up
in-person
within
one.
Mormonism, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You were in this giant echo chamber as a teen growing up, having the same messages reinforced.
Right.
But were you having experiences outside of that, just within your own exploration,
right.
that made you feel that this might not be?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, let me. It's interesting because there's a couple of levels of the echo chamber. Like there's the inner level, which is like where you grow up, like that's your home, your parents' home, right? And you're going to church and you're part of this like it's a pretty small community where you know everybody on like a first name basis, like most people, you know what I mean? You don't know everybody. I mean, we're talking about a couple thousand people, but it's like everyone's friendly with everyone. It's like, there's a very brotherly sort of communal thing there that people are aiming for, people are trying to get to. Do you know what I mean? Like it's important to people to be in community, which is cool. Like I like that. And also it's big families.
Beautiful, actually.
It's big families. So because of the big families, it's like, it's awesome. You go and you hang out and it's like, there's all of these cool people and they're all cool with each other because they're all family. So it's like, you're not dealing with all this like weird, I don't know. I've always felt welcome and it's super cool. Like in that sense. But then as soon as you have something wrong with the principles, you know what I mean? As soon as you question the axioms, as soon as you say, why are we doing it this way? Like, why are we doing any of this at all, actually? Like, why don't we just start asking the question, why more?
Well, how would you get reprimanded for that?
I just wouldn't probably be engaged with. Like, it'd be hard to get somebody to ask why with me. Do you know what I mean? And to go into dialogos about it like this, like where we're trying to understand each other a little bit better. You know what I mean? Like trying to see your perspective, you try to see my perspective, and we'll end up in some cooler place because of it. Do you know what I mean? and maybe something will emerge that could only have happened if we were talking together. Like if you have your world siloed away from my world, then there's no possibility for like some sort of an emergent logos.
Yeah.
An emergent word to come out of that. So it's like,
so it's actually that you're also limited in speech in what you can discuss with.
yeah, I mean, you have sacred cows, right? Like you have things that are off limits, and you have things that just sort of emotionally polarize people away from each other. But I was part of the problem too, because I was emotional about it as well. Do you see what I mean? And I'm referring to like more with my dad, because that's really the only place that I've had with my parents that I really had to engage with this sort of like polarization. But I know that there's a lot of other people who that would happen with also, had I tried to engage with them. Do you see what I mean? So I just don't really go there with people, because it's like it feels to them almost like an invasion or like an attack, right? Because it's like you're invading their mind with these like ideas or something. Like you're coming at them with something that's like, it's not kosher.
It's a foreign invasion.
Yeah, seriously. Like, in fact, it would not surprise me if John Timpson or whoever, like the leadership of where I grew up, right, is in response to what I've said about Mormonism, in response to Jeremy Reynolds' letter, the CES letter about Mormonism, right? And he's from a totally different side of the pond. Like he's from like the mainstream LDS church, where there's like millions and millions of members, right? So he's part of a different.
How many millions of members do you think there are?
We talked about this. I'm trying to remember. If I recall, he says active members, they estimate about 5 million, but they have a few more million than that are inactive as well. And then a bunch of people.
What does it mean to be inactive?
Well, they're technically like it's weird. Like you kind of have this record with the church. Do you know what I mean? Like about, I guess, your ordinances and stuff and tithing record and everything else. They probably have like a file for you and whatever. And yeah, so your inactive members are people who are not really going to church, I guess. They're not really engaged in any church functions, but they still have their record. They haven't gone and asked to become inactive or whatever.
So does the church...
Or not inactive, but not a member.
Moderate their livelihoods as well? Like, does the church know what each member is making?
Well, in theory, I mean, because if everybody's paying an honest tithing, then they can just extrapolate by a factor of 10. They can just say, well, you're paying 10% of your income, so if 10% of this money is everybody's income. Do you see what I mean? So, if somebody's not paying them tithing, then, are you not making money, or are you not paying your tithing? Do you know what I mean?
What's a tithing?
A tithing is a tithe. It's just like a donation. It's like, give this to God. That's how it would be described. Give this to God. This chunk, this 10% goes to God. But doesn't go to God. It goes to like a management fund. Do you see what I mean? It goes to a hedge fund that's got $100 billion in it. And then the church has like all these physical assets that they've also used their money to buy. So they've got like, a bunch of Tesla stock, I'm sure. Like Bitcoin, probably. They probably have some Bitcoin now. Like if I was them, I'd be putting it in Bitcoin. Like if you really want to be the overlords of the earth and control everything, get the Bitcoin.
It would be really scary if, I don't even want to put it out there. That's kind of scary.
Dude, fucking sling it at me. I don't care. Let's go deep into the dungeons.
The people that came up with the foundation and structure. Well, okay, let me put it to you this way. If you looked at behavior modification as an art or as a profession, and you were to think, how would I apply, if I was a behavioral scientist and I wanted to get a certain result out of a population, I could just look at the mechanics of like a very organized, controlled religion and just see what works, and how could that organized principle have a hold on this many people in the modern world, right?
Totally.
Because it's Mormonism and what's happening within tech, it's, to me, doesn't seem like correlated. That they, in the sense that you mentioned that this management fund would be investing in technological tools for technological advancement. It would be kind of weird if these behavioral scientists were studying these religions and then applying the same strategies to an algorithm or to an experiment.
Populations.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're trying to figure out how to like control populations in a sense, like just masses, like people.
Yeah. But you need to have,
Orwellian style, George Orwell, like 1984. Like how do you control?
Like if I was a supervillain, that's probably what I would do.
You figure out how to study.
I'd be there like mega mind, like, tell me what works.
Yeah.
Tell me which religion right now is like got a good grip. Like I wanted, everyone's paying their tiny.
Well, see, not
you
everybody's.
Can't ask why.
Not everybody's paying their tithing, but a big chunk of people are. I'm sure. I mean, I think the church's revenues are like 6 or 7 billion a year, somewhere like that. I mean, it's a lot of people, but it's a lot of money.
Well, I would be like study them. And then tell me what works.
Well, I think,
and then I'm going to bring together a team of behavioral scientists,
right?
And then we're going to create that situation. We're going to test it out. We'll see.
Should I take a crack at it from the behavioral?
Yeah.
Okay, so like from the side of it of like, I guess you could say I'm familiar enough with Mormonism to see how it has affected me, and like just in my own personal lens. Like, so for whatever that's worth. Like, I don't know. I haven't done enough like therapy with a behavioral scientist or a behavioral therapist to like get the feedback that I need to see myself clearly in the mirror. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, hopefully there'll be an AI for that. It'll tell you.
Yeah, I'm sure I'd still like have all these blind spots about it. But like my point is I definitely feel like the one factor that it would have to include is an immediate trust in authority and a depowering of the self or the individual. So a debasing of individual sovereignty. That's one of the first things that you would want to do to it. And this is the first process to domestication of like taking the thing all the way to what you want, like the domesticated thing. So instead of the wild ox, you have the cow, right? And it goes to work for you or whatever. And it gives you what you want from it. It's extractive in nature, that sort of relationship.
It's modern day slavery in some senses. But right when you said about the erosion of free will.
Mm-hmm. Well, I said sovereignty, but yeah.
Well, I think it's a big part of being sovereign is to will your own future.
Yeah, so this is a good
your
question,
own
though.
Future fully as like what your original blueprint is intended.
Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to tease out what you said. So you said blueprint was intended. So the blueprint was intending you to have free will, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. And free will, so the question, I guess, and this is what I'm trying to sort out right now and why I want to go back and talk to Forrest Landry again, this guy that like I had a podcast with maybe like 2 weeks ago. And he's a philosopher, and he's saying that choice, like similar to what you're saying, but not about free will. He's saying it about choice. He's saying the two things are different. And choice is actually fundamental to the self. So it's actually more fundamental than self is choice. And that, and I'm still trying to like fully wrap my head around that and trying to be able to put it into my own words and articulate it. So I feel like I want to go talk to him again so that I can actually get there. And I'm reading his book right now, The Effective Choice, which is like basically beautiful aphorisms about that. And I have a copy of it if you want one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have an extra copy he gave me. So it's really good.
Well, when you look at that and in a world where when you go online, you want to emulate everybody else, right? You want to look like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And you might want to dress a certain way. You might want to, have your lifestyle a certain way so you could post about it to blend with everybody else.
Right.
It's almost that like this homogenization of things you could be. Like now everyone is an influencer, or like, what does that mean to be an influencer?
Yeah.
Now that's
real quick. You're saying by homogenization, homo meaning like the same. So you're basically turning into like some sort of, like a copy of something.
Yeah. You're behaving the same way as everybody else. Mm-hmm. And it's so important right now to be creative because a lot of, our tasks and the way that we're converging with certain technologies is going to make human beings redundant. I think it's very important to be creative and to be like who you were really designed to be, right? And this is the perfect time to actually allow that to happen, because we have so many amazing tools to let you express yourself multidimensionally. And it's kind of sad if you're steered in a direction to be homogenized in your behavior. Well, you won't be able to fully express that.
Yeah,
And-
you're totally right. Like,
and
go ahead.
if in that process, if I am an activist for certain things because it's popular online and my life goes in a certain direction, and I'm being herded into those directions, essentially, like join this group or join that group, or create this feedback loop, create this echo chamber in like different platforms. So that's really, I'm shaping my life in that way. And if I'm personally, as a participant in that, not aware that there are certain mechanisms that I can't see hurting me in certain directions or modifying my behavior, I will soon just rely on the algorithm to make these choices for me. And thus, my right to choice, or my right to will my future in any way that I think is resonant or synergistic, like that won't be a thing. And that's being sort of taken away. We're
Yeah.
not even noticing that
Yeah.
at the very core of just being a human being.
Sure. I would just argue that's not a new phenomena. It's just like the way that it's happening has changed, and it's gotten
It
to
takes
this
new
sort of
old
like,
world crimes, just takes new shapes.
exactly, yeah. So that's what's happened, in my opinion, because the old world crimes, say, of like circumcision for domestication of males, like at a young age, like babies. Think about that one.
Yeah.
It's dark. It's dark. That's fucked up. It's like, I don't want to be the guy that has the knife. Seriously, who wants to just cut babies like all day? Like, that's fucked up. Dude, that's a weird one.
Oh my God, I never thought about that guy.
It's a weird one. I mean, and then it's weird to just traumatize an infant too, and to like make them unwhole in some way. Do you know what I mean? It's like a mark. It's like a mark of the it's a
Shoot.
signature of your cult. It's a signature of your ideology, just right there. Like, it's like prove that you're Jewish. Do you know what I mean? Or that you're Christian. Like, that's the thing. Or I don't know how it is in Islamic culture, but I think since they're all descendants of Abrahamic faith,
Yeah.
Islamic culture is the same. Yeah, so that's to me just like an instant domestication of males by a male society. That's the strange thing. Do you see what I mean?
Oh my God, if you were to like look, as we're reflecting on this, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so strange, because this has always been going on.
Yeah.
It's just now we're able to see it take new forms. We're in that like in between stage, right when we're still analog and we're becoming more digital, we're becoming more immersed, we're transcending with the technology. If you were to reflect back now, this is like just at that moment where we're just kind of free range and organic. We get to make this decision.
We're not really organic anymore. You might call us free range.
Oh no, we're not
I don't.
organic.
I mean, how many organic humans have you seen lately? Do you know what I mean? If we're gonna say that, like, that's a fucked up term, organic humans. But you know what I mean. Like, we're all like, we are modified in some way. Yeah.
If you decide to, I really want to have discussions personally, just because I want to increase my own knowledge base about it. But
Yeah.
I just wonder how gene editing will be popularized.
Probably first to eliminate disease. So to give people the sense of security that their kid won't have any problems. Like, they won't be born with scoliosis. They won't be born with sickle cell disease or whatever, right? Like, you're not going to have to deal with that Down syndrome child ever. Do you see what I mean? Because there won't be any Down syndrome babies. It'll be like we'll get rid of the bad genetics from the beginning, from the start. And that's eugenics. Like, that's basically like create.
But what I'm saying is, how do you think it will be
utopia with gene.
popularized? If you were to
Well,
take a guess.
I would say that in and of itself makes it popular. Just that. Like, just if you could legit stop somebody's from ever having that big of like a big condition, like the bad ones. I mean, nobody, like, if you had a choice, if it was like, hey, listen, you can risk, like, because it's in your family or whatever, conditions are bad. So it's like you can risk some percentage of Down syndrome and some percentage of this or that. Like different peoples have different genetic problems that they don't want to have come out in their kids or whatever, right? Like, so for example, I have a hip condition, like I'm predisposed to a hip condition when I was born. I mean, like it runs in my family. So I have some cousins with screws in their hips. And I used to have a screw in my hip, my left hip, like a 3-inch metal screw that I got like taken out in 2000 and like 3.5 years ago. Yeah. So anyways, that thing got put in there because I was having hip problems because it runs in my family. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, what if those things, and I'm not saying you can do this with gene therapy.
Yeah.
So I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying, what if you could get rid of that possibility?
Referring to it to do it for vanity reasons or aesthetics.
Yeah, that's another thing. So those things are on the two sides of the same coin. So it's like the first thing is like, oh yeah, I want to be the best parent. I want to, like, what if I give birth to a kid that's like disabled and he realizes that he could have easily not had that disability had his parents just opted in for this gene therapy that was 100% effective and no risk. And even if it doesn't work, right away, and it's like, oh, I just lost another egg. It's not like I'm or a zygote or whatever, right? It's not like I'm losing any sleep about it. Like, we can try again. I mean, maybe you lose sleep because you want to have a kid and whatever. But my point is you're not throwing away a human being. You're maybe it's all through in vitro anyways. Like at that point, maybe you're not even carrying the child. Maybe it's an external womb.
Artificial wombs, yeah.
Yeah.
I got freaked out. I was at a seminar somewhere, and there was a speaker. I think it was Ray Dalio. I'm not sure, but he freaked me out because he was advocating or, hyping up this future industry of artificial wombs. I just thought it was so creepy. I was like, oh, what?
like as an investment, like as an industry to invest in it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, damn. That's because he's a good investor. So fuck, if he's into it, then it's happening.
Oh, it's happening.
Yeah.
Because there's already the merger of AI companies with the gene editing company. So you can sort of go online and probably okay, how do I say this? I'm hypothesizing for sure, but I'm saying that the merger of those companies exists, but I'm hypothesizing that you'd be able to go on and with the assistance of the AI,
get the ideal like profile.
Get the profile. Ideal gene profile, and then be able to work with it to continue to.
So what if this is actually considered like a breakthrough? So like kind of like that of us inventing a computer or something like that. Like what if it's a massive shift in our species, from a species perspective? It's a massive shift in our trajectory, like in what we are in the future, because you're talking about being able to change the code of nature and play God completely and make designer babies, like whatever that means, whatever the design is. Now you truly are created in the image of God, right? Like now we're going to create the image of what is ideal, and that's what's going to be created.
Your insurance company if you have a favorable gene edit.
No shit. You see, I don't know how it'll work. I don't know how it'll work with people who are already alive. Like maybe that's a thing. Maybe it's like, yeah, we're going to take this experimental thing that's going to change my genetics and get rid of my disease. Maybe. I think another thing that's going to happen too, though, is like people will be modifying zygotes. They'll be modifying like genetics. They'll just be taking, eggs from females and sperm from males and turning it into designer babies. Or maybe it gets to a point where like they don't even need the donors anymore. Do you know what I mean?
You know what? This is why I'm like, we connected on this, and I thought that we're definitely ancient ancestors because we're witnessing like basically de-speciation from being Homo sapiens.
Right.
So we must be ancestors witnessing something like this. And that's why I think personally for me, I am so fascinated by that world and ancient civilizations.
Yeah.
Because we must be ancestors. Like we have to be. if
Okay.
we're witnessing all of this.
I'm going to write down ancestors, and we're going to come right back to this later because we definitely have to talk about it. But what I was going to say, oh, fuck, what is it? I don't want to lose this. We were just talking about something before, civilization. What was it?
We were talking about,
Despeciation.
yeah, despeciation.
Okay, so despeciation. You could argue that it's despeciation, I guess, but I think of it more like a metamorphosis because we are the thing doing the thing. So it's like the caterpillar transforms to the butterfly. You don't see some other species come in and eat up all the caterpillars or something. Or, I don't know, like it seems like our species is going through like a fundamental shift of some kind. Do you know what I mean? Like the type of shift from caterpillar to butterfly,
So let me ask you this.
like a metamorphosis.
If it was to truly be a metamorphosis, but at the same time, while that's going on, the technology that you're interacting with is operating at a level where it's how do I say, taking away your right to will, or nudging you or hurting you to be a certain way that erodes, you know what I mean, takes away that right to will, or, you know, presupposes you to groupthink. Don't you think if that's going on in the mind, you know, what sort of choices will people make? Will it really be a metamorphosis, or is it like, will you get a command to evolve a certain way and then you just do it?
Yeah.
And then you think that it's amazing, it's a metamorphosis.
So if you think that and it's your felt sense of reality, then it's kind of no different. Do you see what I mean? Like if your sense is that this is like some beautiful thing and you're in like a bliss state and you're stoked about the state of the world because we got to some sort of collective coherence and, you know, we were able to all have the same agenda as a species or something, right? But you lose the individual sovereignty.
Right.
You kind of have to go with the agenda. You kind of
Yeah.
have to go along with it. Well, if it's like a top-down force thing, like a power hierarchy, right? Like we're used to having those where it's like a Jeff Bezos at the top and then, you know, whatever he wants. Like, or Mark's a better example because
Right.
he has full control of Facebook. Like he literally can just wake
he's
up
the
and change
emperor
it.
of Facebook.
Yeah. So, yeah, like that top-down thing, I think does create, you know, it could create like this whole slave dynamic, right? Like that's the idea. But why would the metamorphosis of a caterpillar be for something that's bad for the bigger picture of the ecosystem of the environment? So in other words, the caterpillar co-evolved with its environment. It only exists because there's a forest or there's leaves to eat, right? And a habitat that's good for caterpillars. That's why the caterpillar exists at all. And then the reason that there's this habitat, this environment that grows these things for these caterpillars is because of pollination between the plant kingdom, which is facilitated by butterflies. So it's like that is a fundamental role that the caterpillar plays in the whole thing. It's symbiotic as fuck. In fact, it's equilibrium. There's no ecosystem without both pollinators and the plants and the caterpillars who are growing into pollinators are part of that cycle. It's part of the butterfly pollinator cycle. So what is the human cycle if we're looking at big cycles of time? Do you see what I mean? Now look at deep time. And this is what I want to talk about ancestors. Like, think about deep time. Think about, you know, we met actually at, we should probably paint this context. We met at a Graham Hancock event in Sedona. Yeah, and we started talking and immediately we were like, oh, we got a lot to talk about. And we do. And we've talked a bunch of times since then. It's been really fun hanging out with you.
Likewise.
So there's this kind of other shift in perspective that's going on right now that I think is equally as important as the new awareness of what's happening with tech and with social media and, you know, sovereignty and data and all the things we've been talking about. But this other thing of like sovereignty. So there's more than one aspect. It's not just autonomy. Autonomy is important. Being able to choose for yourself is important, obviously. Having awareness, though, is like the first thing, because it's like waking up to like what's going on before you is part of the process before you can really make choice. Like, and so Forrest Landry says it like something, I'm not going to say it perfectly, but he's saying like the amount of attention you give something kind of has a direct relationship to how much effective choice you can make. Do you You see what I mean? So if like you have all focus and attention and awareness and like the full picture sort of fleshed out, then you can make a pretty good choice. But if you're just like, you know, oh, I guess my choice is going to be green or blue on these leggings because it's just like what's in front of me. You know what I mean? And that's like the choice. I think that I have a choice with my Instagram relationship because I'm choosing the products or because I'm choosing the colors of the products or something, right? Like, oh no, I manage my relationship with it pretty well. It's like, I'm talking about like more awareness of the whole thing, like in the context of what we just talked about and what you're really looking at and all that kind of thing, right? So by giving more awareness to this, we can become more sovereign. And this is this idea of our past, like the human past. To me, the history of the human past could also be the answer to our future in some fundamental, like there's a relationship there, don't you think? Like that there's an awakening to what we really are, right? Yeah. And there's a kind of a popular idea right now, like kind of misanthropic idea that we're sort of parasitic, that we're sort of like this invasive creature that's like bad for the world or something. And I don't know. I think that like for me, the fact that when I get out into the world, into my natural environment, you know, like into the ocean or into the forest or under the stars or whatever, right? Like rock climbing on the canyons, like when I'm in those.
By the way, did you see the eclipse last night?
Yeah, it was fucking phenomenal. I watched it, dude. You should have came over. Like, so we went.
I lived to go watch it. Sorry to go on this tangent, but I was like, you guys went to the side EDM thing, and that
was the best view of it, though. Like that's what I'm saying. So
really?
if you walked around the beach a little bit, the horizon like dips down, and the reason no one could see the eclipse was because it was behind all those trees and those houses. But if you walk around,
from the other side?
There was like the rock kind of cuts out a little bit, and right when I realized it, I'm like, I'll bet you over there if I wade out into the water a little bit, and it's literally like this much water. Like it was this long sandbank. There was no like waves hitting you. It was just like you had to take your shoes off. And we walked out into the water like 20 feet and had a perfect view of it. And it was completely eclipsed right when we saw it. Like we literally walked out and saw it.
Did you see when it was red?
Yeah. We walked out.
Is that creepy?
It's crazy. It's cool.
It's super creepy.
Yeah. And then it was like only like an hour later there. It was almost full again.
But when it looked red, it looked like it was, I don't know. It almost looked like holographic to me. It was really strange. And then, so I left because I'm like, I need to see this eclipse.
Right, I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I left, and I'm like watching this happen, and it was unbelievable. It was the best birthday gift I could get.
Yeah, happy birthday, early birthday.
Yeah.
From the moon. So like that.
Thank you.
So like we were just over there because the music was a cool vibe. And then we ended up getting the music and the ocean and the moon.
Right.
And I was just like, me and Lily were like, fuck, this is so cool. Like,
but in that exact time, right? So we're coming from this, I felt last night was this primordial chanting, drumming, dancing, you know, before this eclipse. And it felt so connective and it felt so wholesome. Yeah. And so I guess when we're talking about this technological metamorphosis as being juxtaposed to something as so like just sitting around drumming, how do you incentivize or how do you liberate people in knowing that this sort of transition or these metamorphosis is occurring so that they could get or make a conscious choice towards it, coming from that deep primordial need for or desire for evolution to constantly transcend your form?
Well, I mean, so I thought the one thing, to bring it back to the fire or to the lack thereof, to the jump circle, I thought that the fire was the thing that was the key that was missing, right? And I think
to give context to it though, because they also there was just a fire in Laguna 2 days prior to that. So I thought it was, you know, very synchronistic, or, you know, that there was no fire at this. It was almost like the mourning, like not having a fire there was like mourning the fires that just ravaged through all the homes. Mm-hmm. But it was very eerie and creepy in that sense.
Yeah, I felt like it should have been a fire. But I'm biased in favor of fire. I think that it's part of the primordial past. I think it's part of like it's answering your question. Like
Right.
I think that the fire actually does bring you back to something fundamental. And we've lost our connection to that as a community, as a species, as a greater thing.
Yeah.
Our relationship to fire is obviously we got to fight it if it's burning through the world, like if there's forest fires and stuff.
Yeah.
But like there could be a different kind of relationship to it too, like in the sense that some people still have, like if you go down to for example, like a medicine journey in like South America or whatever, and you go sit with natives who have a connection to the fire, it's a different story. You know what I mean? Like it's part of their culture and tradition and everything, and it's like very sacred, and it's this thing that the whole community enjoys in together, can join in together. So like last night, like you had this in-group of people. You had all the people who were stoked about drum night, drum circle on the beach, but it wasn't representative. I mean, it was representative of some people who live in probably Laguna Beach in the area, whatever, but it wasn't representative of Laguna Beach, because if it was, then the Rangers wouldn't have been like kind of patrolling it the way that they were. It would be more like.
I want to hear about your conversation with the Rangers, because they told you this was grandfathered in, and I had no idea.
Yeah, well, because they were shutting down the EDM thing, because they had like 5 tiki torches or something. They had 5 tiki torches.
They were shutting down the side festival next to the main event.
But they were like butane torches or something. Like they weren't even like high risk. But even then,
But
like
people were freaked out because
I get
of
it.
the
I
fires.
get it. But like if you had a fire extinguisher right there, or like let's say one of the Rangers just hung out over by that side of the beach and just made sure nothing got crazy. Like that's kind of what they're there for, right? To make sure that's what they were doing. They were walking around to make sure everything was safe, which is, I appreciate that. Make sure it's safe, make sure shit stays clean, and we don't like end up trashing the beach. It's a good idea. But
Also, side note, I'm just like trying to decipher what this whole night was a metaphor for as you're saying all this.
yeah, shit. Yeah, we don't want to lose that. So, well, it ties back
I'm
to
trying
ancestors.
I'm giving it shape though, but go on, because I want to know because the Rangers played a whole big part in this. So they were shutting down the side festival.
It wasn't even really a festival. It was like this one DJ. It was this one DJ who was trying to shoot like some content. They were having a good time. They were partying, right?
I'm overinflating the title, the news story.
Yeah. But he was like, him and his friends from LA, they're there shooting. He's just playing this sweet set. It was really fun. And he had just his friends there, and they were partying, and they were trying to get some content for like, this guy's trying to help him get some content. So he's filming stuff. And it was a great spot to film. It was a beautiful spot. Like there's the ocean. There's this like cool rock backdrop. It was this cool little cove to dance in.
Nice.
It was a good time. And then the Rangers, I guess they had told them no to the fire already previously. So when they came back, they shut it. They like, hey, we're shutting it down, right? So they turned the fire off, but then they kept playing. And so me and Lily left back to the drum circle thinking they were like shut down because we were walking away. The Rangers were talking to him. We're like, oh, fuck, that sucks. We're like, bummer, that sucks. Those Rangers are shutting this down. And then like I look over and I see some shit. Like this is like 30 minutes later or whatever. I see some like shadows dancing around, and I'm like, they're fucking still over there. So like I walked over there and they were still partying. They just turned the fire off. And so we kept dancing. It was a good time. Until eventually the Rangers came back again, and this is after we'd already seen the eclipse for a while. So luckily we got like this Goldilocks. We got this like Goldilocks zone of like 20, 30 minutes where there was the eclipse and the music. But we were there. We left right before 10 because that's when they're closing the park. So they shut it down that time. We all left. We left the same time the DJ kid played, that was playing left as well. But anyways, my point is just like if you have like the fire department involved, your community, you see what I mean? That's what the fire department is as well. They're part of the community. So it's like you bring the whole community into it. It's a community thing. It's like we want to facilitate this sort of thing that we want to keep a relationship to fire. We want to keep a relationship to the cycles of the moon. Those are important. Those are like primordial, like you said.
So this is the metaphor part of it, was that when you talk to the Rangers, you found out that they had this drum circle full moon party grandfathered in as an outdoor event there.
Yeah, I guess that's what he made it sound like. This ranger named Kyle, he was saying that that normally you have to have a separate, like a permit, right, to get like permission to do something like loud, like music, right? Which I guess makes sense, because it's like if you have like a public beach, then you want it to be, you know, you don't want it to be just total chaos. Like if you've got a ton of people, you don't want one guy just like blaring some obnoxious music, like pissing off all the families or whatever. You know, I get it. Like some guy who just doesn't give a fuck about his neighbors. Like I totally get that. And so maybe the permit things, like I don't know. It just seems like when you make that wall, all of a sudden, like who's in charge of saying yes to the permits, and then
But this was
you get this strict
grandfathered in,
thing.
though. This was like,
Yeah,
and I
this
find
was an
that
old permit that they grandfathered in, and who knows? Maybe it goes back to the Timothy Leary days. I have no idea. That would make sense. I mean, you know, those motherfuckers were doing full moon drum circles on the beach
yes,
and like
they were
burning fires and shit.
Of course they were. I'm gonna get to the root of this Laguna mystery.
Yeah. So, anyways, like I think that to tie it back, like the fire, the cycles of not just the moon, but the celestial bodies. So the cycles of the stars and the cycles of all the planets and all that stuff. Like that's something that our ancestors were dialed into, very, very, very dialed into. So Graham Hancock's career is proving that. Like it's just showing exactly how dialed in they were. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so maybe it's worth talking about that, because I don't think I've had somebody on the podcast. It's a new thing. You know, I haven't had somebody on the podcast where we've really kind of dove into that. I don't think. I mean, we might have. I've talked about the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, sort of like off the cuff, like for a short period of time. But I've never really talked to somebody who is on the same kind of page. Do you know what I mean about it? So I'm going to be getting George Howard on when we're on the East Coast, and who knows, maybe Randall Carlson if he can swing it, and then maybe Graham Hancock. That's the idea. Got to figure out how to make that work. Like he says he's busy till November. We'll see. So but anyways, this point of ancestors.
I might have an idea for you, but
okay, I want to hear that later. Yeah. So, but this point of ancestors is the great year is an important part of it. So the great year is, we hear about it from Plato, and it's this 25,000 year cycle or whatever, right? Like some number of, I don't know the exact number, but it's like actually pretty significant number. It's kind of like a sacred number according to Randall Carlson. So, but anyways, this great year, this is a cycle of the earth. So you have the rotation of the earth around its axis, the rotation of the earth around the sun, and then you have this third cycle, which is the precession of the equinox or the great year. And if you just draw an axis through the center of the earth, it's like, imagine the earth is spinning on its axis like a top, and the top is drawing a circle in the heavens. And so it's like it's on this wobble. The earth is wobbling. And it takes 26,000 years for it to wobble once, to go around in one cycle. It's called the Great Year. And I guess the implication is that probably Earth got hit by something massive in the past, and it sent us on a wobble, like some massive rock smashed us. So now we're wobbling off through space in this 26,000 year Great Year. And
maybe that was part of a great reset.
That was a great reset, definitely. Well, I mean, it was probably long enough that there were no humans to witness it, but you know what I mean?
Let's shake this up now.
Yeah, there are definitely no humans around for that one. That was probably during some heavy bombardment phase of the Earth where it was just like, everything's just like smashing into us. So anyways, the wobble is, or the cycle rather, of the Great Year is known by Plato.
Yeah.
And I think that is also tied to Egypt, the way that he knows that. But all of these ancient civilizations across the world have these precessional numbers and these astronomical alignments baked into their very architecture. So like, for example, the Great Sphinx, if you stand on the back of the Sphinx on the spring equinox, the sun rises directly between the ears of the Sphinx. It's an equinoctial marker, so it's basically saying, this is the day. As soon as the sun rises between the ears, that's the equinox. You see what I mean? So it's like, and does it every year. Like it's this crazy sort of astronomically aligned structure that, was found in the middle of the fucking desert, carved out of like a single bedrock.
Do you want to hear a wild hypothesis on this?
What?
that perhaps, again, in my mythical thinking, what if we had found the codes to connect or merge with the organic technology that allows us to perhaps become interstellar or allow us to metamorphosize through nature or through understanding cycles of time and understanding the entire your relevance to the entire galaxy, having that sort of expansive consciousness.
So like
Perhaps,
psychedelics.
yeah, but naturally, like perhaps maybe we were in a state where our bodies were endogenously creating,
Potentially, or we were just
right?
taking it, or we were just taking it ceremonially in some sort of like intentional way.
We were, but I just mean that I kind of think of it as we were these highly advanced
Okay.
beings that were, had that connection, and that was sort of cut off in a way, right? And
So before you can, I mean, so that's it. I'm not saying I disagree with your hypothesis.
I'm saying that we're looking at those codes now, rediscovering them, having this remembering of perhaps there was a bigger cycle, bigger rhythm than my small worldview occurring, and that perhaps our ancestors evolved through that or knew the sort of mechanics or organic upgrades that were occurring through this entire celestial dance that's occurring and the way that it's affecting us. So we're evolving through that.
For sure. I mean, it makes sense that we're calling it the great year. And so let's just think about what the year is. Well, the year is seasonal. It's a cycle, just like the day is a cycle. And so half the time is dark. Do you know what I mean? Or it's the back and forth. And so if your great year, you could argue that the traveling through the zodiac or whatever is, and it's not actually traveling, but like that's the idea, is because the way that the viewing platform of Earth that we're on is moving on this wobble. So our viewing platform is changing gradually 1 degree out of 360 degrees, 1 degree every 72 years. So every human lifetime, we're like 1/360th the way there. Do you know what I mean? And that over time makes it look like the star, our sun, like moves through the zodiac, through the constellations. So
It has a pattern.
yeah, it's a cycle. But there's a bigger cosmic relationship where we're part of like the Milky Way. We're part of all these other, there's these other energies out there. There's other stars. There's all this other stuff out in the universe. So the question is does that great year cycle have some sort of relevance to life on Earth in a seasonal way? Like,
Yes.
in the same sort of like you would expect from day and night, or you'd expect from winter, spring, summer, fall, winter again, right? Would you expect something like that to manifest as perhaps like a golden age of man, a silver age, a bronze age, an iron age, a bronze age, a silver age, back to golden age, and then like this cycle that continues?
Well, that's interesting. But what if you were stuck in that cycle for too long? Think about it. There's also this other side of things where people believe that, to be stuck in this cyclical time loop, if we were to look at it like that, then it's sort of the end justifies the means. But what about, have you ever thought about at least that that's an entire hamster wheel of its own for
Yeah.
the soul and its
Sure.
incarnations and
Yeah, sure.
and how this difference in the great year affects beings in terms of being sovereign, fifth elemental beings, like really having your full consciousness operating at full capacity, like you are one with your environment, and perhaps the great year and these cycles of time sort of deviate away from that, and your sort of task is to I guess grow or
So it's goal based, like
Yeah.
it's task based, like
yeah
that sounds like the same thing as a hamster wheel, like for incarnations.
yeah
Yeah. So my point is
it's
like,
really I'm just sharing things of
Yeah, no,
like places my mind goes.
I like it. I like it because I feel the same way. And like if we listen to like or read about the Kalpas and Hinduism and these long cyclical kind of epochs of time, of human time. That's what's strange, is these are long periods of time, like way longer than civilization, like hundreds of thousands of years, like for a Kalpa or something, right? Like, and we're talking about many different kalpas. So I mean, I'm not super familiar with that flavor of it, of their mythology about it and everything, but yeah, they're basically saying it just goes and goes and goes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like that's an interesting difference in how we see the past. You know, we see ourselves as like having risen up from some sort of Malthusian past of like apes that were life was brutish and short and terrible, and that's just what it's always been like. And you know, you could take the argument that like, well, hunter-gatherer life, yeah, there's some things about our life now that are better, and there's some things about their life that are better. So it's not just like a cut and dry one's like just better than the other, in the sense that like,
Well, definitely more comfortable.
yeah. I mean, energy, technology, all the things that we have, you know, the ability to like prevent disease and stuff, right? Like there's so many things that you wouldn't want to just go back to primitive man for. But, you know, I want to bring certain things from primitive man or primordial man into the now, like fire and community, and maybe a better relationship to psychedelics, perhaps. Like I think that was probably something that's been figured out on the smaller hunter-gatherer scale, but not on the bigger scale yet. So it's like, yeah, we are going through this weird shift. This what's it like? It's kind of like a Cambrian explosion. It's like a fundamental change from what our type of species is to something else, like a different kind of scale to it, where we're no longer apex predators, where we're something else, right? So yeah, I mean, and you could say, is that homo techno or transhumans or whatever you want to call it? Like, what is the thing? What is the thing that we're evolving into? And will there be a fork? Are we being forked right now? Like where there's like this metaverse version, this technologically fused version versus like
Well,
the
it doesn't have to be a
analog
binary
version.
choice.
Right.
It seems like if you are adverse to the technology, you know, if you're a Luddite essentially, and then there's everyone else that falls on the spectrum of within their engagement. If you were to really be hyper aware of what's going on, you couldn't really dispose of or disengage from your relationship to technology, right? So we're so like you already said to me today, like you already are a cyborg, like you already are thinking and outsourcing your thinking through utilizing tech. So
it's true. We both are. I mean,
yeah,
I used Google Maps to get here.
Yeah, but right now we're at that point where you and I are the ones that are basically creating the blueprint of what that would look like if it was, you know, being able to integrate with it in a way that enhances your humanity rather than suppresses it, right? So now you and I are connected on the level of, oh my God, we notice this is happening, you know, this is the ancient past, this, you know, we kind of understand these bigger expanses of time, and so we notice something is going on. What is this thing that's going on? And like, what are the tools available to help facilitate this? Like, we notice this change occurring. And we're both of the mindset of how do we integrate with this, knowing all of this and having all this information. How do you integrate with it, or how do you lead your life in a way that creates that utopia?
Yeah.
You know, that that I'm personally optimistic of, because all these cycles of time, we go through these like periods of rise and falls in our civilization, right? Like one bad decision or one positive, like every decision you make right now in your one lifetime has these ripple effects for future generations. That's never been the case. That's never been the case. You know, normally if you're born at a time, you don't have to actually consider this being a human of, you know, right before whatever this new thing is that emerges. Yeah, you didn't
go through like a change of kind type of, like a categorical change of the type of species that you are usually.
In
like
one
most
lifetime.
Of our ancestors didn't go through that,
No, not in one lifetime.
Some of them did, probably. Like if you think about Atlantis, for example. So, and I think it's worth prefacing this with some more information about the Graham Hancock stuff, because it's like, as soon as somebody hears me say that, and I just throw a word like Atlantis in there, it's like, now it's like if they were engaged in this, taking this seriously, now it's like, oh, no, I'm not taking that seriously. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, fuck, what is this pseudoscience, or what is this like fantastical thinking about some weird myth or something like that? But it's like, no, you don't have to go you don't have to dig too deep to become curious, like in my
No.
opinion. Like if you
Really, it's partly imagination as well, right?
sure.
Because that our faculty, our imagination has also been eroded,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now we only think of imagination as something that's been created, like a movie, but I'm talking about collective imagination, right? That's
Yes.
sort of been,
Yeah, so it's like a collective consciousness that is not completely unconscious, but that has some sort of coherence to it. So like some ability for cognition. So like to have a collective mind in the first place, you have to have like cognition, and then you can have sense making and choice making and action taking on a collective scale. And this is why I think we're both excited about DAOs and blockchain,
yeah.
which we're going to talk about in a second. So, but before we go into that, like the past, so the reason you can't write this off as like non-important, in my opinion, and why it's something I'm curious about, and why it didn't take very much work for me to become curious. It took me like a bong rip in Joe Rogan's podcast, and I was like exposed to Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. I was like, motherfucker, like this is a bombshell in my opinion, like worth exploring, because it does kind of seem like we need to rewrite our narrative
It
of the
called your
past.
soul because it opened up this window to peek through a far more even ancient past than what you had,
Right.
had a construct of in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, and it does this weird thing too, where to take a saying from Terence McKenna, it's like don't trust authority, like trust yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like reject authority, trust yourself, and that is this. Like when you realize that like the authority, that like the education system, the textbooks, the whatever, like the authority told you how it was. Like this is, so it's kind of taking, in a way, it's like a relationship to the information where it's like, your job is to actually, just like religion, your job is to submit yourself to the textbook, submit yourself to the test, submit yourself to the teacher, like assimilate the information, test well on the information, like at least at the young age, right? Like, I mean, maybe in some upper echelon college courses, there's a lot of like challenge the information potentially. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that can't exist in the education system. I'm just saying the way that my education was more around like copy paste the information into me, and then I'm considered good or bad based on my ability to regurgitate the information and to like test well on the
It's
information.
also just dehumanizing when you describe it like that.
It's just domestication.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so which information did you get domesticated with? Because if you're a German in like, the 30s, well, then you're a Nazi. You know what I mean? Like not all Germans, but you see my point. Like, that's that was just a byproduct of domestication, by you could call it brainwashing, you could call it education, you could call it whatever. But my point is like there's a fundamental shift when you're like, wait a minute. So maybe nobody actually fucking knows, like with certainty. In fact, by definition, you really can't know with certainty. Like that's the scientific method in a nutshell. We're all wrong. This is just our best guess. And we're going to keep updating our hypotheses as we get more information. You know what I mean? And we'll try to become more precise with our understanding, but we're never going to have the whole picture. So it's like to say that you have like this picture of the past that, we makes sense enough that we don't need to go looking for more of the picture is just completely ludicrous. To act like anybody has any idea what the fuck the Great Pyramid of Giza was for. Like maybe not no idea, but like it wasn't for burying emperors.
No.
So if it wasn't if there were not a bunch of mummies and pottery and hieroglyphics inside of the pyramid, what was it for and how the fuck was it built? Until you can answer those questions like that are convincingly, I'm not going to go with your little bronze saw theory that like they just used slaves and bronze sawed all these millions of tons of stone into perfect alignment, astronomical alignment with true north.
What we're saying here is that you really have to be curious about your archaic beliefs. You got to just go in the inventory of your beliefs.
Yeah.
And take out all your archaic beliefs and like lay them out on the table and like really look at where, some of the things that are the most ancient, that have really standed the test of time.
Yeah.
When you really look at those things and like peer into what it must have been like to be a citizen of that world, or to be a peasant in that world, or to be a slave in that world, and you look at the structures that were built during that time collectively by masses of people that required large amount of intelligence and cohesion and community. You can't build something like that if people think that they're slaves. So when I look at, my fascination with ancient civilizations has always been to, know myself in a way, because I look at, for a really long time, decoupling from all these like ancient belief systems about where things came from. And I think once you keep pulling that thread, it's almost like this thread, at least for me, to sovereignty, in knowing, that there was a time where beings, interacted with each other in a way that allowed for something like this to happen. By that, I mean just the construction of the pyramids and what it meant to that civilization at the time, symbolically.
In other words, you can reverse engineer, in a way, you can try to reverse engineer a human society that's capable of building that pyramid, that structure. So it's like, in a way, it's like a signature of some fundamental truth. Like you're saying, like just the fact that it exists, the fact that it's still standing, the fact that we can go survey it, that we can see its astronomical alignment, that we can see all the ratios and all the sacred numbers and the mathematics baked into it, and like how it's a scale model of Earth, like the ratio, the relationship between the size of the Great Pyramid times 4,332,000 or whatever it is, like is the same as like I think the perimeter circumference of the Earth or whatever. So there's this ridiculous awareness of this civilization that they encapsulated in this monument. They were like, we know our relationship to the Earth perfectly. You know what I mean? And we know our relationship to the stars. Like we know the scale.
And that's what Atlantis is, right? Like, to me, in my mind, it's a global community of civilizations that at what point had this knowledge and awareness, and they were able to build similar structures with similar layouts. How did they communicate with each other?
Well, so that's a good question. So there's a couple ways that you could think about that. And I think Graham Hancock's perspective is more that like there was some seafaring civilization, maritime civilization. I don't think he's giving them, like flying cars or anything, like any kind of weird technology, other than the fact of just what you can see, like their awareness of these, these scales of space and time, like the great cycles of the Earth and the relationship between us and the stars, like as above, so below,
Well, the way that I think about it, if we were to meet one of the beings that was alive in that time and was really in that harmonic collective, they would appear like they're an alien to us. Like you would think that being is an alien.
Why not just human?
I mean, alien in behavior, or alien in, for example, when I think of alien, I think of something that has more of a higher power or higher connection or higher intelligence than I do. So it would appear like that it's alien to me. If I met a human being that told me that, hey, I have fifth elemental power, like I can will the rain, I can will this, I can connect to the stars in this way, and I travel at night, and I'd be like, are you a human? Like, are you?
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily. So, I mean, I see what you're saying, but that either that's fundamentally human to be that way. You see what I mean? And maybe we have some dormant DNA, or we have something that we've lost, right? Like, and it's actually your birthright. Like, it's actually your birthright, and you're a more sovereign version of yourself that's completely like lit up and connected to and empowered by your environment and your community. Is something like what you just described, or something in that direction, like of the imagination. Like you can call it fifth dimensional elemental consciousness or whatever. But like for as far as I can tell,
I don't think it's a different consciousness. It's actually the most humane consciousness that allows
Sure.
there to be this organic grid.
But I like to decouple it from the word of alien, because a lot of people think that it was actual aliens. Do you see what I mean? Like that, like some sort of species from the stars that is responsible for this technology.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So, and I'm not saying I know definitively that's not the case, because I think it's still a mystery, but it seems more likely and plausible to me that it's just us in the past.
Yeah.
You see, with something that we've lost over deep time, right? Which you can lose shit over deep time when there's really rocky days, like when impacts happen, like when, something with like 1,000 times all of the nuclear power, like nuclear warhead power on Earth that we have now, hits Earth all at once. Do you know what I mean? Like that's a bad day for Earth, not just for humans. Like it's a bad day for Earth. It's like the species on Earth are going to struggle. So you lose like something like 30 species or 30 something species of megafauna in North America when the Younger Dryas boundary happens, and you see like sea levels go up, 300-400 feet over, like, in the climate record, this massive spike in sea level rise, right? So like if those things were to happen today, like that's just erasing everything that we've built. It's just erasing civilization. So what is left? What survives that? Elon Musk or Peter Thiel in their place that they figured out how to avoid the impact because they saw what side of the earth was going to get hit. They went to New Zealand or whatever. They figured out.
They were off on Mars.
No, because it's too early. Like you can't survive. You can't survive on Mars, and they know that. They know that like a mission, even if you had the smartest fuckers on Earth and everything, if you just we all just get on our best technology suits and we shut off on a rocket ship towards Mars, I don't think anybody's super optimistic. Because when you get to Mars, you're in the worst fucking place. Do you know what I mean? So it's like that's going to take humans and generations and fucking time before Mars is anything like where you want to go to die. If you're, in my opinion, or where you want to go to live, rather.
But if there was news of an impending doom of a comet hitting the planet, I bet you people would work really fast to create that portal to Mars and make it habitable ASAP.
Probably, yeah. And I'm not saying that's a bad idea.
Oh
Fuck
my
it.
gosh.
What if? No.
Oh
I think of it is kind of a bad idea for two reasons. One is the rapture ideology of it, right? Which is the obvious reason, which is you don't leave everyone else behind and just fuck off. Do you know what I mean? Okay, this is all going up in flames. We're just bouncing, and that's what we're going to spend all of our energy and resources on. No, you spend all of your energy and resources on avoiding the disaster as much as possible. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So even if it's like a Hail Mary, you throw all your eggs in the Hail Mary. Do you know what I mean? If I'm the billionaire, or if anybody, if any human being who's a member of Earth doesn't put their creative capacities towards saving Earth,
right, then
where's your home? Where else? That's just pathological. And that's what the psychedelics are for. It's remember what you're part of. Do you know what I mean? Remember that you're not just a separate self isolated from your environment. That's an illusion. That's that's just this psychosis that we're in right now, where we've forgotten our fundamental awareness, a consciousness of what we really are.
Let me ask you this: do you think news of when we were at that seminar, right? And people were talking about, well, shouldn't we know this? Should we know if there's a comet hitting the planet? Based on the Younger and Dryas impact theory, it's these cycles of time or precession of the Earth. This is about time. Do you think that really, what would be the benefit of telling an entire global population that a comet is hitting? There would be
spaced out. That would be the benefit right there, spaced out. So if we can't use our technology to defend Earth from an impact, then we have nothing, because it will go back to nothing. Do you see what I mean? Our technology will go away. So it will have been a false start. It will have been a non-starter. Well, I shouldn't say that, because look at all around and look at it. We've got a pretty incredible, art being created. At the same time, we're kind of destroying things. But my point is I think there's this crazy creation process underway right now. And I think that, maybe this is just me trying to identify with this so that I can stay optimistic and not fall into nihilism. But I feel like we're the butterflies We're the stewards of the planet. We're the pollinators. When we're at our proper awareness, like in our evolutionary scale of things, then we turn into something like that's absolutely beautiful, that's in service to beauty and in service to life, and
I think that
it's creating a more beautiful
though.
world.
That requires
Of course.
autonomy.
So it's not beautiful if it's this top down. If it's this top down like dystopian Orwellian hierarchical thing where the AI or the government or the state or whatever you want to call it, like something has control. Do you know what I mean? That's taking away the autonomy and the sovereignty of all of the individuals, and that's how we get there. Like, I don't want to live on an Earth where that's the way that we deflect the asteroid or the comet. Do you see what I mean? Like, because then you're on that Earth. Like I'd rather the asteroid hit the fucking thing.
So
you see
there
what
is
I mean?
this opportunity for new Earth, and maybe that new Earth exists in our collective imagination, right? Like,
Sure.
dare to imagine, like,
Sure.
what's possible.
Yeah.
Because when you enter those virtual realities, the metaverse, it's going to look unreal. It's going to look like just the best expression of collective imagination being put into a platform, let's say, and that's very alluring. But there's also this other side of it where we've lost our organ of imagination, right? Like really willing something beautiful into existence through your daily action, your daily resonant being just during this time, having that context and knowing like I am an ancestor, I am transcending into becoming this avatar or this thing. I don't know what it is yet, but I have this awareness and I lead my life in this way because I want to be a butterfly, or I want to go through this metamorphosis, whatever is at the other side of it, doom and gloom, I create my reality.
Yeah. So we're talking about it. To me, this sounds a lot like ikigai, which is I've been kind of exploring on this podcast and in my own life, just the idea of to bring it to the individual level. Like, what is it that you're like your reason for being? Like, what is it that you have to bring to Earth and to humanity and to life? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's like a random number generator happening called creation, and it's just creating all of us.
Right.
We're basically random numbers. You know what I mean? It's like you have this crazy complex like backdrop of experience and evolution and DNA that leads to two people fucking
Right.
and creating you. And then your environment creates you even more. You know what I mean? So it's like you have this this uniqueness about you that, in my opinion, as far as I can tell, I mean, maybe in some multiverse theory, maybe there's more of you, but like, it seems like you're this crazy unique thing in the universe, and that we might actually be this crazy unique thing. And maybe, yeah, it's a big cosmos, and I'd like to think that there's this, infinite Earths out there, but maybe this is it. Maybe this is the time that it's happened this way, at least, and
maybe it's
unique.
that we've been so dispersed as humanity. If you think about it the other way, we decided that there's all these other worlds to explore, and we became multidimensional beings, and we forgot of our memory here on Earth, like the other way around.
Yeah.
And now
because of like an impact or something.
Right. Yes. And now the other way around. Now we know that there's perhaps going to be an impact, and you really have to become embodied. Like, you really have to become embodied in the consciousness, or have ecological consciousness,
Right.
and awareness of the planet, your relationship to it, your original design and your blueprint. Like, a seed knows, where it's, what that code is that it's
Sure.
going to, there's a code in a way that it could express itself, but human beings have that code, and also the will to express themselves, or, just in the way that you epigenetically evolve based on your area and surroundings and where you grow up. Being like really in touch with that original code, it almost seems like to me that it's a necessary function of being. Like, it's not a spiritual thing, it's not a religious thing, it's just like at the very core level of what it means to be a human being. If you're going through this time in complete, without that awareness, I find it very challenging it would be very challenging to navigate towards what some would consider a dystopia. Because when you wake up in that world, it'll be a dystopia to you.
Yeah. So we want to obviously avoid that dystopia. Like we want to avoid the we were talking earlier about like the Orwellian state, sort of like surveillance state, the where we're extrapolating our current state out even further into loss of sovereignty, right? So it's like maybe some sort of like matrix or like metaverse or something where we're all sort of like plugged into something. So how can we take what we have currently available or what's emerging currently, like say in the creative corners of the world, like people who are innovating with Web3 and with decentralized organizations, right?
The solar punks.
Yeah, solar punks.
Yeah, solar punks. So the solar punks within Web3, they imagine a very ecological world, very conscious and integrated with technology in a way that preserves nature. And the images of it, that future that they envision is absolutely amazing. It's beautiful. It's this very futuristic merger of, nature and tech. So I want to feed those imaginations. Like I want to see where that goes.
That sounds like these guys that this couple, they live down in Brazil right now. I think the guy's from the U.S. and they have this project. I think it's called Aruvana, and they're trying to imagine that too. Like where they're trying to imagine some sort of game B or civilization B that looks and feels authentic. You know what I mean? Like that seems like something more resonant with like an embodiment, right? Like where we're embodied with our environment as a species, and upregulating the individual while having coherence on the collective level, right? Because to me, that's what coherence really is. Like coherence isn't where you have the top-down corporation distribution, right? Like you might have productivity, you might have efficiency, you might have like capacity in some way to, like, obviously Coca-Cola can do stuff, right? Like and the Chinese government can do stuff, like scary amounts of stuff because of their power, right? So I'm not saying the power is not there, but like coherence would be where the individual nodes that are participating in that are all choosing it. They're all choice based.
It's very intentional.
And so the byproduct, because of the intention and the choice, the byproduct of the thing is emergent.
And the foresight.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by foresight?
Taking into account when you're building, like right now, people that are building with tools of Web3, learning from the externalities of things what hasn't worked, the externalities of Web 2.0. I'm just talking about within the Web3 community, developing tools that are going to lead into this major solar punk ecological world where we can imagine new ways of being. They need to have the foresight, or one ought to have the foresight of knowing when you know about the past and you sort of can distill the things that haven't worked to I guess what I'm trying to say is that when I talk to certain founders or attendees conferences within the Web3 space, I don't really see foresight because they're just sort of building without having the awareness of like what the externalities of what they're building would potentially look like and how it impacts the society.
That was the vibe I got from our conversation yesterday when we were talking to your friend and we were talking about AI. I was thinking like, but what about all the externalities though? You know what I mean? Like in thinking about just how to build AI. An AI that builds AI, an AI that like improves itself, general intelligence, like something that's this whole fundamental like shift in intelligence and from our tools to our creations. Do you know what I mean?
And I think that is, if you think about it, a type of activism on its own. If you're sort of, at least for me, I kind of identified in that way where like I feel like the way that I'm expressing myself, I'm becoming in my own world like an activist for humane integration of technology, just like only in my small little world and bubble, at least when I have conversations with people within the field, I always bring that thread in because I'm curious to see if their mind works, not if they're really thinking it through or thinking about it in a humane way, and seeing if that's definitely the case. I've had conversations with certain founders that are building virtual realities and I talk about, a digital constitution. Like, how are you guys, or about digital wellness? Like, how are you guys protecting the people that are in your communities, that are wanting to integrate with that? And I don't see that foresight there. So that's why I bring that up, because I think it's important that right now we have the tools to sort of predict, hey, if we go in this direction, this might be the outcome. We can utilize machine learning for that, right? So there's those type of applications exist, but I don't think that they're being utilized for in that way.
Yeah, I think so. It's a fundamental change of like a mind state
Yes.
that's important, not necessarily the technology, in my opinion. Like, so the one thing better preface the technology, or you're gonna be in trouble, right? Like, if you have your extractive sort of capitalism goggles on when you're developing the technology, well, then that's gonna emerge in the technology, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like, or some externalities will occur that you can't predict. But like, I think that we have got to find and hone in on what's the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, that we can try to imagine. You know what I mean? Let's put our heads together on that one. I think Charles Eisenstein did a pretty good job of it in his attempt with his book titled that, The More Beautiful World. And I'm trying to meet up with him and talk to him. But like, that's the trick, right? Like, the trick is like, imagine the thing, put our heads together. Let's figure out what it is that we actually can all come together on as far as like what we want to create. And to me, the most important place to start, and I'm just one fucking monkey with a perspective, so it's not like this is this is just for worth whatever it's worth, but I think the meta problem is our ability to do collective coherence, to be coherent collectively. In other words, it's a being state. You know what I mean? Like, so a stupid example of this would be like if the drum circle was at a higher level of coherence in Laguna Beach, then perhaps maybe there would have been an integration with the fire department and the greater community, and the city was more involved, and maybe it was more of the community, and maybe it was more organized, and it was like it was a different thing. You see what I mean? Because like it was this kind of almost monthly communal ceremony around fire.
Yeah.
So that's to me that would be more coherent state than, even though it was awesome last night. It would just be a slightly more coherent state. But my point is DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, is one thing that's kind of emerging as this new playground for rethinking that coherence problem, I guess. Like rethinking how we can have a social operating system between many people who don't know each other, perhaps, across borders and countries and everything else, and demographics and skin types, skin colors and everything else, right? All humans. Spaced out would be an example of a potential possibility that we could create if we wanted to. That was an
collective, coherent decision making.
Around space in that particular example.
Yeah, the one, I think the main part that's a bit of a challenge with DAOs is because you have to change your governors every 3 months. I think it's still at its first iteration.
Sure.
There's a lot that are forming that aren't necessarily making it all the way through. I am personally involved in one of them that isn't getting the grants. Why? Because we're proposing to have, it's called Rising DAO. So we're proposing to have a DAO based on a physical retreat center, the ranch that you've been to, and to have healing modalities for our community within that space.
Sure.
And
I love this idea, by the way.
I've had this
exact idea is written in this fucking book.
Yeah. So it's like the collective gets to decide. Like, for example, like a person can propose in the DAO, right, to say, hey, I think we all need to focus on digital detoxes, okay, for the next while. Like, we all need to digital detox. We need to recalibrate our brains, recalibrate our dopamine systems. Okay, so now for the next 3 months, we're going to hold retreats or events or workshops that have to do with digital wellness, so the collective can organize that together in a physical space to have a digital twin of its online community.
And it wouldn't just be about detoxing the digital, which would be massively important. It'd be bringing those people together in one place.
In person.
Yeah.
One of the big challenges with DAOs is if the idea itself, I think, is awesome and the tools exist. But I think if it's primarily on just online, like it's on Discord, where a lot of it exists now, it's just, to me, it doesn't have the same power as to really bring and collectivize people together, because it's missing that in-person connection.
But how do you do that at scale? Because the thing that DAOs do have going for it is anybody can join the server from any country at any time. Right. So that's the one thing where it's like, if you go to a centralized location at some place, then now you've created a filter where you're going to get some people, maybe you're going to get some smaller group.
I meant for your particular DAO, for your particular.
Right. But my point is like, if I want Space DAO, for example, I want Indians and Chinese and I want Russians and I want United States.
Well, why couldn't there be a Space DAO event or a place in those physical location? Right? Yeah. Like in my mind, right? Like the way that I think about it is, if there was a healing space that people got, they created community in together and they engaged in mindfulness and meditation or whatever it is, whatever modality that group wants to sort of connect with its members. At least that's the intention for our DAO, is to bring in leaders in together and like have a physical location where people meet in person, or at least because I think it's important to create things in stages, right? So in this particular case, when you have a DAO, right, and the governors are all spread out, what is the main point of interaction? I feel like when it's only online, like you're describing, it has the ability to scale, but I'm trying to figure out, at least for me in my pursuits right now, is how do you create smaller physical locations or attaching the physical to the DAO? Yeah, no,
I think it's an important question for sure. And I talked to this guy who's kind of heavily involved in Citizen DAO. I might do a podcast with him when I'm in Louisiana, if that happens later this year. But he wants to crowdfund this ranch in Wyoming and create a headquarters, because it's this gorgeous fucking ski resort type ranch, right? Like this epic property in Wyoming, which is a crypto friendly state, right? So he's trying to bring the thing together because he sees the problem. He's like realizing, trying to get this shit done on Discord isn't ideal. You know what I mean? And if you're going to solve big problems, like you can't do it over Discord.
But if I'm a member of a community, if I'm a member of a community online, if I had the ability to have like a city hall meeting for my DAO that's in, like, let's say there is a center for it in LA, right? Or a center for wherever you are. If there's a place where I can, I guess, you know what though? This has the potential to become very culty. So it must also like hold.
No, exactly. So this is exactly... This is.
I'm part of the cult Citizen DAO, or I'm part of the cult.
Have you heard of cult DAO? There's actually a cult DAO.
There's a cult DAO.
It's called cult DAO, yeah. Man, I swear to God,
there's a cult DAO.
I might have actually just opened to the exact page, but see, this is me writing about True North Project emerging as a DAO at some point. Do you know what I mean? Let me just since I pulled right to the page, might as well read this. Will soon be a DAO that emerges collective intelligence, group consensus, creative potential. The DAO will be a sandbox of ideas and resources that will seek to build the more beautiful world. That sounds like a fucking cult right there. Build the more beautiful world. That's a rapture ideology right there. It's like the beautiful future. Yeah, it's exactly. The DAO will open source this mission so any and all who wish to join the project may, as there are no borders. All signals welcome. Yeah. There will be noise, but it'll be sifted out. I mean, of course. Like, basically, we have this shit baked in. We have this shit baked into our backstory. You know what I mean? And it's kind of funny because it's like I have it baked in the most. So it's like in my backstory. Like, I grew up in a cult. My parents named me Christian. I've got like this very like weird relationship to cults. Do you see what I mean?
I know.
And so it's like, I obviously, of all people, don't want to go into this space at all. The cult space, that is.
But that makes you the best person actually for it.
Maybe not. But like it's the whole thing is it's not about person, it's about us, right? It's an open sourcing our potential, like open sourcing like our capacity, like getting collective coherence. That is the meta problem. If we can get collective coherence, then yeah, you can you can solve climate change.
Right.
You can flip the comets and asteroids out
Right.
of the way. You know what I mean? Like you can do crazy planetary
definitely
shit.
an amazing tool for collective harmonization of goals, like very big goals together.
And if we were to fuck that up, say, like if we were to, create some runaway AI that's like informed by all of these open source protocols that we've been programming, and it's completely, it's integrated with literally all of our data, and it's not benevolent, and it's like this thing that becomes separate from us, and we become like the slaves or the caterpillar soup for that butterfly to emerge. You know what I mean?
I
like
think
we're the old version,
the
and this is the
case,
butterfly's the
as long
AI.
as we've been humans, that there's always a boogeyman in the picture.
Yeah. So I mean, but this is my point, and maybe this is like a rapturous way to think about it too. I don't know, but like my point is if that were to happen, right? And it was this dystopian AI future because of the blockchain stuff, like at least we were all in it together. Like at least it was an open source, decentralized thing where it's like everybody gotta like you gotta be in this way versus in like, oh no, Google let the fucking thing out of the lab. You know what I mean? Like it was behind like some sort of wall, like
Right.
an Amazon or a Facebook or a Google wall or an Apple wall or whatever, right? And then eventually that went off the rails or something, and we had an AI collision.
Right.
We had a collision with the robots or something, like in some other dystopian scenario you can imagine.
So we're already are becoming these rebels of the some order we don't know yet.
Yeah, I guess.
Sort of. It could be painted in that picture, unfortunately.
I mean, well, reject authority sounds rebellious, doesn't it?
What is that? I heard someone say they're a conscious nonconformist. I really like
Nonconforming, yeah, I like that. It's basically just saying like I'm a woke rebel. But now the word woke's been ruined too. So,
But I think, that is, I say rebel in the sense that we right now, we're talking about utilizing technology for social cohesion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I think we're almost in this, if I look at it, it's in this like biblical time
mm-hmm.
where we're seeing this new architecture
Mm-hmm.
of for our civilization being designed right in front of us, right? So we're sort of coerced into this trajectory, let's say, right? Because do you think, or at least I think, if there, I would be interested in seeing if there was a global referendum of like certain futures being shown to people and having them vote. I'm really curious to see if a lot of people would actually want to go into a very digitized future, just as a very basic choice.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think younger people would skew higher as wanting that future, and older people would definitely not skew high that way. Like they'd probably not want to be a part of it. They just want to hang on to the past. It's like eroding beneath their feet. You know what I mean? It's an interesting idea.
But in terms of, for us, we're sort of that generation that's in the middle of that. And we are talking about, we're having this sort of discernment and this sort of discussion and creating our path forward, charting our course, like charting our North Star. Right?
Yeah. We're the cartographers. We're trying to map the space. Like we're trying to explore what's, the frontier that we're in right now.
Yeah. And I love this because having conversations like this gets me really fired up and excited because I'm like, oh my God, there's someone else that like thinks this way and like they're charting this new course because there's a lot of uncertainty and just like knowing, oh my God, okay, I'm going to do all this, but then a comet's going to hit. There's a comet impact theory. It's going to get us.
On that note, the Uranus
I must figure
hitting.
out how to do it right now. I must figure out something correct. I need to survive.
The comet in my... that was a terrible way to say that. I was going to say I got to go to the bathroom, and then we can come back and talk about the comet. And then I also want to talk to you about cults, and I
Oh
want to
my
talk
gosh.
to you. Yeah, there's some other stuff.
No, let's stop at
No,
cults.
there's some stuff because we got to talk about this DAO. I think we have an open thread that we should
Yeah.
try to hone in on real quick. So, you know, we could have separate conversations about DAOs, about, you know, ancestors in the past. We could there's like so much more to explore there, which I'd love to. But, you know, what does it look like? So let me put it to you this way. Speaking of ancestors, I've heard you say we're future ancestors, right? Like we are we're the generation that's giving rise to the future. Yeah. So we're in the moment now. So because time is actually not linear and it's actually happening now, we're currently ancestors to some future generation. So it's like, as ancestors, thinking of the future, thinking generationally, not thinking quarterly or weekly or daily, but like thinking generationally, what we want, you know, the generations of the future to inherit. What earth do we want them to inherit? What is their birthright? Do you know what I mean? Like what is the more beautiful world that we all know is possible? Like how can we imagine that future? And if you're going to have children, which we talked about this, and you're pro having kids, right?
Yeah.
So it's like if you're into that and you want to have a kid or children, what world are like, how does one go about creating that world for them? Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm interested in, because until I feel like I'm trying to, you know, take this one fucking step at a time wherever the universe takes me. It's like people, you know what I mean? It's interesting. It's like you popped up out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting you in Sedona.
I never pop out of nowhere. I'm very intentional.
That's funny. Well, I think you were definitely there for a reason.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to have met you and dove into all this with you and have hung out with you here in Laguna Beach. And so it's like, I'm not sure where the road leads as far as all those conversations. Right. I have some that I know I want to have, but then there's a bunch that I don't know I want to have yet, but I'm going to enjoy having, like this one.
I'm in the process of developing like this podcast series. It's on ancestors to avatars. It's like looking through and having conversations from the position of being ancestors right now and creating an archive of these conversations so that, you know, perhaps those can become NFTs, like archivable NFTs of conversations being had with experts or collectively as a community about this transition to becoming avatars, and doing it in a way that's infused with imagination. Like there might be a renaissance in art in NFTs through it. It's very interesting. I'm like constantly nudging creators within the space to create images that show the transition from being, you know, ecologically human, just like your human self, to becoming this avatar, where whether that exists fully in a digital sphere or that you know, you're digitally immortal, or what does that look like? What does that look like in images? And so I'm really interested in creating discussion around it and art around it. So that's what that focus of that podcast series is on. Perhaps like that's something that we could actually also collaborate on together in that thread, to keep pulling on that conversation and, you know, to keep expanding that, because I think it's, you know, we could have different political opinions. We could have so many different things that divide us, but I think in the one thing that would unite us is just like having that realization that no matter what your perspective or ideology is right now, your belief system, you're a human being and you're going through this transition.
Yeah, and we're all in this together.
Yes.
We're all one, fundamentally, as corny as that is, as that sounds, you know. It's like you could take any of the mystics and the, you know, the mysteries of the past, from Hinduism to Buddhism to Christianity to Islam to whatever. Like pick your tradition, and there is a mythical tradition about unity. You know what I mean? And us fundamentally being, you know, in the image of God, being one with God. You know what I mean? Like the idea that there's the separateness between us is in fact illusory. It's not actually real. In the same way that an ocean, or excuse me, a wave is not separate from the ocean.
Right. I find it, sometimes I think I'm living in a movie and I just think like, who created this whole narrative? Like, what's going on? But when you look at, when I look at your story, just your name being Christian and your project being called North Star, and
Well, technically True North, but yeah.
yeah,
That's what it's called. Yeah, True North Project.
True North Project. I just keep thinking of the N when I think of North Star.
Yeah.
It's like emblazoned in my head now, that logo. But and having come from a background of Mormonism and talking about this new evolution within humans and technology and where that's going and where your intention is, I just think like, who wrote this story? This is great.
That's pretty weird,
Who
right?
designed this guy? Like, this is pretty ironic.
Well, I'm just as curious as you are about that, like about the story, about who wrote this fucking story. I don't know, like it's
because the rising of Christ is also the rising of the star, Aldebaran, or the three wise men that foresaw the coming of Jesus. They were the three, the three Persian magi, where I consider the three stars in the belt of Orion, where the pyramids are pointed towards.
Sure.
And so what's going on? And then, it's sort of hypothesis perhaps that, the rising of Christ was the rising of this advanced state of consciousness that was decentralized for all. And perhaps it was, we put that on one person, whereas it was something for the entire collective, right?
Yeah.
And I think of it as, why was, I guess it's just another rabbit hole, but the star Aldebaran in the constellation of Taurus, and I bring it up because it's my birthday month, so I'm just like Aldebaran is the bull's eye. So when Orion, the archer, is pulling its arrow, it's hitting the bull's eye, which is the star Aldebaran in the constellation of Taurus, and that houses the Pleiades stars.
Interesting.
So and the bull's eye is considered the divine eye or God's eye, and but this is where that whole bull's eye, shooting that came from, that we're sort of creators of, we pull the arrow on our destiny essentially, and it hits into the star. And that was, when I look into the stories of the myths of the stars, it's all like different civilizations have their own version of the myth, but it's always about this particular star. And I think that had to do with this decentralized this decentralized technology that existed that we've lost connection to. And now it sort of manifests as the internet, or it manifests as a physical, tangible thing that we're holding. But it's just emulating. It's just mirroring something that organically is, that we've been separated from or digressed from.
Yeah.
And that's the real way that I think it's that we can, being in that state of consciousness or having that awareness helps with the humane integration of technology, because then we can really imagine a beautiful future together. And I'm not saying that that's the only condition for it, but it's very helpful because it gives you a very expansive place to build from.
Yes. Love that. And you're making it really hard to wrap this up, because I want to keep talking. The on that note about the technology that they may or may not have had access to, that created this kind of different sort of consciousness that was open. It was open sourced, right? Like it was available for others.
Yeah, there was no centralized authority.
Right. So it was
giving you morsels of it.
So that's what it turned into. That's what the church does, actually. It gives you the centralized power. The priest class gives you the wafers and the water, the wine. It gives you the sacrament. It gives you the Eucharist, the blood and flesh of Christ. Do you see what I mean? Like the symbols of this state of consciousness, the symbols of the awakened one, right? Like of that idea. And this sort of imaginatory effect that humans have of sort of personifying out some sort of archetype of like what we're all shooting for, or something like the Christ, And so there's this guy, Brian Muraresku. Have you heard of his book, The Immortality Key? Mm-hmm. Yes. Have you read that?
No.
highly recommend. You've got to read it. It's so good. I'm trying to meet up with Brian in maybe Washington, D.C., I think is where he's based out of. So it would be later this year. But he's written a book after like a 12-year research project, going deep into the past and deep into, I mean, he speaks like 7 languages or something ridiculous. He's a scholar, he's a linguist, and he's like written this book that builds on the work of Hoffman and Carl Rutt, and one other guy, Wasson, that wrote a book back in like the 70s or something that was trying to find the proof of psychedelics in the ancient past, and like the Soma in Hindu or in the Vedas and whatever, right? So he built on their work, went deeper, and actually wrote this incredible book called The Immortality Key, which kind of shows tells a story of like the human use of psychedelics in religion, and how it's sort of the foundation of like religion, and it's like the first religion with no name,
Right.
and that these wine cults of like the Greeks, like
Right.
Dionysus being a wine god, gave rise to these wine cults of Christianity. Jesus is a wine god. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And the peoples who were the Corinthians, like these peoples in the Bible, the book of John is written in Greek. Like these are Greek speaking peoples that have this Dionysian tradition. Do you know what I mean? And it's interesting because the wine that they were actually drinking was an ordinary wine. In fact, the Greek word for wine doesn't really mean alcohol. There's no word for alcohol in Greek.
No.
Comes from Arabic, I think, alcohol. But the word that they use is pharmacon, which is like a drug, pharmacy. You know, it's like.
Do you have a jug of it right now? We can drink it before going to this full moon thing. Do you have a jug?
I do have a jug of wine. I have a wine bottle in the van, but it's a drug. It's a pharmacon, right? And so they were using these wines they weren't just alcohol. They were like spiked with all kinds of things, and these were strong potions. You know what I mean? Using for different applications for different things, but they were using one particular drug or ceremonial drink called the kukion or the kaikion in Eleusis, and this was a psychedelic brew. So the point is, this Eleusinian tradition has this psychedelic wine or beer or whatever, this psychedelic drink, and they have this death cult where they're basically learning fundamentally what you are on the other side of death, on the other side of like your identification with self, you know, and that trickled down into Christianity. And so this idea that you're talking about, this technology that existed that actually could give rise to a different state of consciousness, I believe you fundamentally have to die before you die. I think you have to let go of the control. You have to like drink you have to follow the white rabbit, right? Like you got to go down the rabbit hole with Alice.
I think you do it on a daily basis. It's just if you're intentional about it.
Yeah, but to your point about the retreat space you're trying to create, and the fact that ketamine therapy is very effective and legal, and ketamine clinics are popping up all over the place, and I happen to know a great one who wants to get into that space more.
I want to learn more, not in this conversation, but I think as a follow-up to your experiences with ketamine.
Here, pull that mic up a little bit.
Your experiences with ketamine and just more about it. I really like to peer into that.
Yeah, we can talk about it, but not now because we got to run.
We got to actually run to a full moon.
Is there
full
anything?
Moon meditation sound bath.
Yeah, this has been super cool and super fun, and I'm glad we were able to make this happen. Sanaz, is there anywhere that people should? I mean, I know you're not really online, but like, what about the documentary that you guys are going to be coming out with? Is there anything that you want to point people towards?
No.
Okay,
and
cool.
I'll tell you why. Because for one, I am not online.
Right.
So I'm actually like terribly terrified of becoming datafied. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm not online. That's actually just my own personal fears.
Weird reason that we met. Another weird thing about how we met, because I didn't know you existed, is interesting.
Our documentary is currently called Detox, and we've actually changed the name to The Cost of Convenience. It's in the process of making the film, and the direction shifting a bit towards human rights. And so I'm excited to see when, we're in post-production for that. So I'm excited to see the feedback on that. We're in our editing phase right now, and really trying to be very intentional about the information that's being shown. And so just during this time, if I become datafied and I finally decide to put a website up, I will tell you.
Okay.
If there's a handle, I'll tell you. But as of right now, I literally don't even exist in the digital sphere.
Well, if you give me one, I will put it in the show notes. And because the chances are I probably won't release this podcast for a couple weeks because I'm like behind and I got like a queue of shit to do. I got like a bunch of work
There's a
ahead.
digital handle. I will let you know. But so far, there is none. People will have to find me in person in Laguna Beach.
This is my 5-word note page: ketamine, ancestors, Tao, comet, cults.
Oh my God.
All right, that was fun. That was cool. Thanks so much for doing this.
Bye.